Herman,
Aye.
here.
Here.
Thank you. Commissioner Franklin,
Here.
Commissioner Grubba,
Yeah.
Commissioner Jimenyahu,
Here.
Commissioner Jeff Berman,
Here.
Commissioner Matei,
Present.
thank you, and I'm here. I'm also joined by Johanna Nyland from the Community Development Department and Tyler Kabilski from the Corporation Council. First order of business is to approve the minutes from the last meeting. Do I have a motion? Commissioner Berman, Commissioner Franklin, all in favor say aye.
Aye.
Thank you, the minutes have been approved. First order of business, let me remind you that the Plan Commission is an advisory board to the Board of Trustees. Decisions that we make tonight are not binding. The cases will be reheard before the Board of Trustees. At their meeting, they meet on the first and third Monday of every month. There is a sign-in sheet somewhere in the back floating around. If you give us your name, your address, maybe your email, we'll notify you when these cases go before the board. Thank you. First case tonight is case 2023-20P, a special use permit at 5238 Tui Avenue. And there's a petitioner here, the Bond Tui LLC, on behalf of Mike Julia. Very good, sir.
Did you bring your original notice packet?
Yeah, I have.
Miko?
Okay. I believe I swore you in for the last meeting, so consider yourself still sworn in. And you testified that your notice is in order, Counselor, is that?
Yes, notice is proper and correct in this case.
Okay, very good. All right, you are requesting a special use permit for outdoor dining at your restaurant, is that correct? Okay, could you give us an overall picture of, or overall statement of why you need the outdoor dining and where it's gonna be and hours of operation?
Yeah, so, we're a specialty coffee roaster.
Could you speak into the microphone?
We're a specialty coffee roaster, so we're a cafe. We don't really make food or anything like that. It's more of like an atmosphere place. So we actually invested in a garage door for the outdoor patio. And I believe previously it was an outdoor patio for the previous restaurant that was in the space. And our hours of operation are from 7 to 11 p.m. and on Friday and Saturday we close at 1 a.m.
Okay. Commissioners, do you have any questions of the petitioner?
Just to point out, having stopped there and enjoyed the place a lot, there are no residences immediately surrounding you. There are no residences across the street, east or west of you, behind you. It's all Holiday Inn, Pep Boys, and
Right.
shopping.
Yep.
Great.
I have a question.
Yeah.
Will there be,
Commis- go ahead.
like music or any kind of speakers outside?
You know what, we do have speakers, we don't have any outside right now, I mean, if we do play music, it's very low.
But do you intend to put them outside?
Yes, we do.
You will,
Yeah.
okay. So there is a noise threshold that we have, you have to adhere to, okay?
Absolutely,
all.
I mean, it's never really loud, it's not really,
Sure.
it's just kinda like some background, music.
Okay. Any other questions? Okay, anything else? If you're ready, I'll have the staff come up and give this report,
Okay.
okay? Thank you. Mike Wojtek, planning, technician.
I'd like to request that the staff report for case 2023-20P be accepted as written.
Okay, so
Um,
accepted.
I'm just gonna try to figure out how to bring this up. Give you a visual reference. Okay, so the outdoor dining, this actually is the first outdoor dining at this spot. There was a Real Urban barbecue. They had proposed outdoor dining, but they never, I don't think they stayed open long enough to actually make it to that point. So this is the first type of offering at this particular location. And I worked with the petitioner to, we reconfigured their outdoor dining area, noting that there's like a guardrail between Holiday Inn and this subject site property. There's an opening in there, so we wanted to have some type of ability for people to safely get between that gap in the guardrail from the hotel if they wanted to visit the outdoor dining area. And then we created an opening in a wooden, there's a wooden barrier there between the wall of the business and then the wooden barrier that would also serve as a safety guard to allow potential guests coming from the hotel to also be able to access the outdoor dining area and the restaurant itself, as well as the rest of the shopping center safely, without having to walk into the driveway. And it's, it just consists of a wooden pergola over the outdoor dining area. There's wooden planters surrounding it on the east, west, and south sides. And then within the planters, for added safety for patrons, there will be bollards in there to protect against any vehicles entering or exiting the parking immediately to the south. Along this entire strip mall, the curbing goes straight into the pavement. There are no raised curbs protecting the driveway from the sidewalk, which is a bit unusual. So we just wanted to make sure that we had as much of a protective barrier for anybody who is dining there as possible. The outdoor dining area will have to operate in compliance with the hours that we permit for outdoor dining. So the restaurant itself may be open later, but outdoor dining is restricted to 8 a.m. to 10 p.m. And then also only between April 1st and October 31st of the year. And then we do have a regulation, I believe, on sound. I believe it's in here. If it's not, then we'll make sure it's listed.
How many tables are they putting out there?
I count 7.
Okay.
Looks like seating for 4 people each. There's a common bench along the wooden planter area, and then there's 3 standalone tables, 4 top tables, so 4 seats each. So the pergola will provide some shade, and we believe it's a good location for this.
Okay. Any questions of the staff? Okay, all right. Thank you, Mike. Is there anyone in the audience who has a comment or a question on this particular case pertaining to the outdoor dining at this facility? No? Okay. Petitioner, please come back up. So you heard the staff report, you know what the requirements are. Do you have any questions or
No questions.
comments?
No.
Okay. Good. Any further questions of the petitioner while he's up? No? Okay. Thank you.
Thank you.
Okay. A motion is in order for case 2023-20P special use permit for outdoor dining at 5238 Toohey. Do I have a motion? Jeff Berman, what's the motion?
I'll second it.
I'll make a motion to accept the staff report as presented.
Okay, who's gonna second? Scott, thank you. Okay. Call for the vote. Commissioner Oosley,
Aye.
Commissioner Manchella,
Aye.
Commissioner Scott Berman,
Aye.
Commissioner Franklin,
Aye.
Commissioner Gupta,
Aye.
Commissioner Giovannaho,
Aye.
Commissioner Jeff Berman,
Aye.
Commissioner Matei,
Aye.
no vote aye. Motion passes. Good luck to you, and, I did hear that you do make a good cup of coffee, so,
Stop by anytime.
thank you. Next case tonight is case 2023-15P, zoning map, I'm sorry, yeah, get me ahead of myself here. So, who is, do we have it here? Do I have it here? dedication. Yeah, this is, no. Oh, here it is, street vacation. It's case 2023-21P, street vacation for, Forest View Road. Mike? Is the village petitioner? Okay, petitioner here, please, for this case. Can I have your name and address for the record?
Alan Rostoker, 9404 Forest View Road, 60203.
Dorian Pope, 9401 Forest View.
Okay, gentlemen, will you raise your right hand? Do you affirm that the testimony you give tonight is the truth, the whole truth, nothing but the truth to help you?
Yes, I do.
Yes.
There's no properness?
Notice is proper and correct.
Okay, very good. Gentlemen, so you're asking for a dedication on this alley? Is that right? Or does-
Correct.
Okay. And can you state the purpose?
Principally, the land has laid unused, certainly for as long as I've been in residence, which is 1 month short of 25 years. We both endeavored, both properties have endeavored to keep the property neat. And we wish to take possession of it, or for the city to vacate said property to us on an equal basis.
Okay. So you're gonna take the property as is?
Yes.
Okay. All right. Any questions of the petitioner? No? Okay, gentlemen, if you're finished, I'll have the staff come up and give us their report. Gentlemen, thank you.
Thank you.
Mike, was this part of our alley vacation program?
So it's separate from that, however, it is identified in our comprehensive plan. Back in 2006, 2007, we reviewed inactive or unused, unpaved, unimproved rights of way. And there's actually a page in our comprehensive plan that maps out numerous rights of way. We had one 2019 that came through for Lewis Terrace. So that's probably the most recent example where something was platted as part of a subdivision, and for various reasons, the adjoining subdivision platted lots that basically created a dead end of the street. In this instance, just to the north is New England Village. So in the 20s, this area was platted with, the potential extension of it contemplated, as a lot of subdivisions do, or that they may have a tract of farmland where they eventually want to go into another phase and extend it further north. In this instance, this was platted. New England Village had not yet been developed until the 40s, and so Forest View right away dead-ended, and it never obviously connected into something else to extend it to, say, Gulf Road. So the area, from what I've seen, there's never been any pavement beyond that section right there. It just stopped north of Emerson. And what they are proposing is 5 feet to the north of where that pavement ends is where the vacated portion of Forest View will start, and it will continue further north. This is looking south now toward vacated Emerson Street, which is running east-west. There's a fence between New England Village and then this right-of-way, so the vacation will stop where that fence line is. Each neighbor will get 33 feet. Entire expanse of the vacation will be a utility easement. You may have seen there is a fire hydrant.
I was gonna ask you about the utility easement there.
So there's a fire hydrant here served by a water line that, a water main that comes through this direction, provides service to this house, and I believe also comes across here. There's also a gas line providing service to 9404 before. And so we're just gonna do an entire, extent of the land to be vacated as an easement, so no housing, you know, no additions, no, construction. A fence can go there, a shed can go there, and they have the understanding that if a company has to come in and do any type of maintenance, that it's at their risk of having that moved or taken out in order to service whatever's on the ground.
Did comment on this?
ComEd is outside of the, extent of vacation. We've got lines running, in a, east-west direction, so the vacation occurs to the north of whatever ComEd service is located. Public Works.
That was a question that Commissioner, Mitchell would have asked.
Oh, yeah, I remember those days, yeah. This instance, there's no, I don't believe there's any ComEd lines running through to the north. I see lines running east-west, so even if there is some type of utility, it will be covered by this overall easement, and
Okay.
there'll be full access granted to whomever needs to go in there to do any type of service.
So the hydrant is on whose property?
The hydrant, will likely be on 9401 if it falls within that 5-foot line.
Oh, okay.
It's right on the edge. I came up with a 5-foot gap between where the pavement ends and then where the vacation begins, so that when they come in and plow snow, the plows, and say there's a fence built there, the plows won't just push the snow right into the fence and break the fence. We wanna have a little bit of an area that's like a buffer between property line, fence line, and where the snow could be deposited.
To me, that fire hydrant looks just a little out of place. But,
Yeah, I mean, it was put in probably when they anticipated this street potentially
Yeah.
going through at some point, and that just didn't happen with another developer coming in.
so they have to keep that area clear then?
Yeah,
Okay.
yeah, that would be highly recommended, so we know where that fire hydrant is if we had a really heavy snow.
Okay.
That's standard practice, we wouldn't have any condition.
Any questions of the staff? No? Okay. Thank you, Mike. Gentlemen, could you please come back up? I just have one question. Who's gonna be the recipient of the hydrant? All right, so you're gonna make sure it's maintained and kept clear, right? Okay. That's actually for your own safety too. Okay. Do you have any further comments or questions?
Not at this time.
I'm sorry?
Not at this time.
Okay, thank you very much. Okay. All right, open for a motion on case 2023-21P, street vacation Forest View Road,
I move
I'll second it.
approval as presented.
as presented.
Second.
And Jeff? Jeff, okay. Call for vote, Commissioner Osley,
Aye.
Commissioner Manchella,
Aye.
Commissioner Berman,
Aye.
Seth Berman, Commissioner Franklin,
Aye.
Commissioner Gupta,
Aye.
Commissioner Jivanyahu, Commissioner Jeff Berman,
Aye.
Commissioner Matei,
Aye.
now vote aye. Okay, gentlemen, you have an alley.
Street.
Okay, moving on, I have 3 cases that's actually a holdover from the meeting, prior. Cases 2023-15P, 2023-16P, 15P is a zoning map amendment, 16P is a subdivision at 4600 Main Street with a dedication, and 2023-17P is a site plan approval at 4600 Main Street. And we did close all public comments pertaining to this case at the last meeting. Subsequent to at the end of that meeting, it was suggested by the commission that the developer go back and kind of rethink it and maybe have more conversation with the people in the neighborhood. So I'm gonna ask the petitioner to come up and to give us an update on how that went.
Mr. Chair, members of the Planning Commission, the staff, the community. Thank you very much. We appreciate the opportunity to be here. As the chair said, We were specifically asked to encourage to have communication between the petitioner and the citizens group related to the project. And I'll tell you, we've had a lot of it, which I think is very, very positive. I wanted to give you a little history of the project, because that communication didn't start on, I think, August 3rd, when you asked us to do that. So we've been working with the village for more than a year and a half. We have now, with the last one being Tuesday of this week, had 3 meetings with the communities, multiple additional discussions with individuals, and one of which was more than an hour-long phone call with one of the individuals from the group. And we're pleased by those. I will say that while we recognize that we're never gonna please everyone, we were able to identify a lot of the issues and address those. So what I wanted to do was to go through a few of the key points where we've significantly discussed issues and modified those plans based on these discussions. One of the things we did on August 15th at our second community meeting was that we asked everyone from the community to tell us their top 3 items. And so I'm gonna go through these in the orders of those who got the most votes and those that were the biggest issues raised. The first was density. No surprise there. But I think there may have been a fair amount missing. We've had discussions with people who were not at all aware that this project started off at 158 multifamily and townhome units. It was then reduced to 138 multifamily and townhome units based on discussions from the staff and from the community and from the village officials. Then we dropped it down to 112 units. A lot of discussions, a lot of changes, some significant changes in the value of the project. But finally, we reduced that to 68 units. That's a 57% reduction in density. I will tell you that I've been doing this for 35 years. I can't remember the last time I had a project that either had 3 community meetings or that had that large a reduction in density. It was a major effort both by the property owner and the developer. It cost both of them real money, but we think it was as great a change as we were able to make. Give you another perspective on it, it was a reduction from 40.3 units per acre down to 35 units to an acre, down to 28 units to an acre, and finally we reduced down to 17.3 units per acre. That's in light of the fact that surrounding us are townhomes at 28 units to the acre, immediately adjacent to us, and across the street, across Main Street, we have multifamily at between 34 and 46 units per acre. I will say that one of the comments we had was, well, but the single-family homes have a different density. We were looking at what multifamily density was. I'm not aware of any multifamily or townhome project in the village of Skokie, or honestly, almost any in this entire region that doesn't have more density than single-family homes. But this is clearly a significant change. One of the other big issues was reduction in height. We've all seen the signs, no tall buildings, and we took it seriously. Again, a lot of time, a lot of effort. We started off at a 5-story building. Reminder that 60 feet or 6 stories is permitted with a planned development in the R4 district. We reduced that down to first to 4 stories, then we reduced it down to 3 stories, all working with the staff, responding to the community. And we have finally, it's 3-story multifamily. We finally have eliminated all the multifamily at this property. One of the biggest concerns we heard raised was having multifamily built here. And we also made it only townhomes on this project. The last one, in terms of density, there are approximately 10 single-family homes facing this project from the north. And in our first plan, we had 26 townhomes facing them. We reoriented the entire project to have only 8 townhomes facing those 10 houses. Again, never assume that I'm gonna satisfy everyone, but difficult to ever argue that there wasn't significant compromise here, listening to the community, listening to the village, and addressing it. Next big issue on our vote list was parking. Parking meets or exceeds all the village standards. This was raised. We've heard, well, but you didn't change the number of parking spots. And the practical answer is what we did do was to go back to the books, to verify with the village staff, with the village planners, and with the national codes that we were in compliance with all of them with respect to the parking. We did have one potential for creating more parking here, but it really didn't work on the site. But we've looked at it very seriously. There are 158 total parking spaces here, 2 spaces per unit and 22 visitor spaces. We've expressed in the meetings, we understand there's a lot of concern about parking. That really doesn't come from this project. It comes because this project is surrounded by numerous multifamily homes and townhomes which have 1 or less parking spaces per unit. Probably very appropriate at the time they were built. And we understand why, hearing that, there's a lot of concern, but we're very satisfied and pleased that we meet what your standards are. Next big issue is height. I've already hit on some of this, but again, 60 feet, 6 stories is allowed with planned development in the R4 district. We could still do that under zoning within the front part of the project, even without a rezoning. We've again done that 60-foot, 5-story building, and based on our communication with the community and the village, have reduced it down three times to have 32-foot tall townhomes. One of the issues that some of you may have heard, we certainly have heard it, is, well, wait a minute, you have a parapet on it. We've discussed that parapet wall now at least 3 different meetings. The parapet wall, as you know, as your staff has confirmed, is specifically excluded from the definition of a height of a building in your code. So that is not in there. And you have adopted the International Residential Code that requires a 3-foot parapet on top of a building like this. So that's what we built. Again, we did have comments. I believe Peter asked Mr. Osley asked one of the members of the community, would you be okay with a 32-foot tall building if it was a house? And he admitted they would. So we're very pleased that we're not asking to change our height with a planned development. We have 32 feet, which is permitted, by the way, in both the R1 and the R4 zoning without a planned development. The next one was zoning. Village staff has confirmed for us that consolidating this into one zoning district is required. I'm not gonna repeat their staff or our extensive testimony on it, but we agreed to that, we've not objected. And part of this is creating development that's a transition between those more dense multifamily and townhomes and the single-family homes. There was a concern raised, one that we hadn't identified. In one of our community meetings, concern raised, but wait a minute, doesn't this mean that the next developer down the road could take your rezoning to R4 and suddenly build multifamily on the R1, formerly R1 district? Thought it was a good idea. We spoke with the planning department, we spoke with your attorneys, and spoke with the property owner. And we've agreed to record a restriction on the property which would prohibit R4 uses on the former R1 portion of the property. Those uses that are only allowed in R4. And that's probably primarily for our purposes, multifamily, but it's also assisted living, skilled nursing, and parking as a principal use. Those are the only uses that are permitted in R4 that aren't permitted in the R1 district. And so we have agreed to record a restriction on that and have requested that when you make a recommendation that include that requirement and that the village board include that in their ordinance to make sure that is there. We talked about a lot of other things. I'm not gonna go into all of them, but just to give you some of the idea of some of the other items that have come up based on discussions with the community, which I'm pleased have now been resolved. That includes extensive sustainability, including our Green Globe certification, even though this project is not subject to the village's sustainability ordinance because we've been in the queue already for a year and a half. We've agreed to an affordable housing donation to meet the spirit of the village's affordable housing ordinance, assuming that it's approved. We're going to do it anyway, whether it's approved or not. We actually indicated we would do both sustainability and the affordable housing before we had ever seen a draft of either ordinance from the village. It was part of the client's commitment to the project. And again, I know we can't make everyone happy, but I think many members of the community have been pleased that we're doing that voluntarily. Traffic was one of the other big issues identified. Traffic is probably the biggest change between the current use and this one. Not a surprise, the school has significant impact on peak hour traffic. And I know that Erie Crown has made significant efforts to address that as part of what they're doing, but these aren't small numbers. In the peak hour, the school has 435 trips in peak morning hour. The new use will only have 30 trips in the peak morning hour. I've actually never done a redevelopment that changed it that much unless you were turning something into a park. So it's just a really significant change there. Again, Louis Abuna from KLOA spoke about that extensively, so I'm not gonna go into it more. We were asked to add more open space. We added 2 new parks to the plan based on those discussions. One of the interesting parts of it is that we raised in the community meetings. They were originally designed to be for this development. We asked the question, would you like those to be open and be public parks? At this point, at that meeting, I would tell you there were as many people who were unsure if they wanted that as who did want it. We remain open to making it public if that's the desire of the Plan Commission. And if it's not, we'll leave it the way it is on the plans. Setbacks. We meet all of the setbacks on the project. We meet the setbacks on our front road, which is Main Street. Our side yards, both side streets, we meet or exceed those setbacks. And we significantly exceed those setbacks in the rear yard, where those 10 single-family homes are. Massing, we've made building modifications. You'll see a little bit when our architect comes up. Some of the separation of those buildings, all of this came from discussions both with staff and the community. I want to talk about just a couple of other items on this. You've received, as did we, submitted yesterday, a 58-page, I apologize, a extensive letter, I believe authored by Mr. Marley, to the Plan Commission. And we all received today a 58-page PowerPoint. We submitted a response to the letter from yesterday. I believe you all have that in your packet. We interdelineated just to make it easier. I'm not gonna go through every single item. And if I had typos, I had less than 24 hours, so. But we tried to respond to each of the items. What I'd like to do is to walk through a little bit of what's identified on that PowerPoint that I believe you also received since we did, and address some of the issues that are raised there. The first issue is that a significant number of the slides and a significant part of the letter relate to site plans that are not before this Plan Commission. I leave it to your attorney to respond to it, but it is my understanding this Planning Commission does not have jurisdiction to review someone else's plans for petitioner's property. And in addition to that, they're really not applicable to what we're doing. We have said in community meetings, we've been asked, could you build less units on this property? And the answer is, sure. We didn't have to make money. We didn't have to make it an economically viable project. I could build 1 or 2 single-family homes on it. Could I reduce the number of townhomes? We could build 10 townhomes and give you a 200-foot setback. Again, the project wouldn't be economically viable. So we both request that those site plans not be admissible or discussed before this Plan Commission because it's not part of your review, and also want to encourage you to recognize that plans that aren't done by the developer, that don't address all the issues with the plan, that haven't worked for a year and a half through your staff process, really have no place before you. both the letter and, another significant percentage of those slides you received, all are based on the author's, I assume, true belief that this project does not meet the village code. We went back when we received that. We not only reviewed it ourselves, but reviewed it with the village staff, with your zoning administrator, and received a confirmation that we do in fact meet all of the codes. Therefore, we'd also ask you not to spend time this evening, looking at issues and concerns that aren't real. And we hope that there's a comfort level given to the community that your staff has confirmed, having received that these items are in compliance. Just a couple of other quick items. Some of what we've heard in our community meetings and also what you received in the letters is an indication that, as of August 1, 2023, this was the 68-unit townhome development. So therefore, the developer hasn't been willing to change it at all. Well, I think you all recognize, and I recognize the emotions that get in this, but we've already shown you how far this project's gone down, how many times we've done it. There was no indication by anyone, I just read exactly what you told us to do, that we had to suddenly pretend that all of that other work had never occurred, all of the other changes had never occurred. And again, I could go back to it, but the incredible change in density and height of the buildings, et cetera, have all occurred as part of these negotiations. We didn't do this simply. Again, it had a real economic impact. We've had to bother your staff on a very, very regular basis. Every time we revise those plans, every time we try to reduce it down. But we're very pleased that really does address those issues. A couple of other issues are raised. One related to the number of bedrooms of the project. Our plan specifically identified, and that was tied to how many parking spaces you have to have, because 3 bedrooms require a half of visitor space and 2 bedrooms do not. We've walked it through with your staff. It's on our plans, and for the benefit of the community, who may not be as aware of this as we are, if we get your recommendation of approval, if the village board approves it, we have to build in accordance with those site plans. We could no more walk in and build more bedrooms in this project than we could walk in with another 20 units on this, more than you approved. So that concern, again, isn't real, and we're pleased to see that. There were also some identification that, to no one's surprise, there are less dense townhome developments, not near here, but less dense townhome developments that were identified in different areas in the village. We've never argued with that. There are also many, many more dense developments of townhomes and multifamily in the village. That's not really the issue before you today. The reason we've identified the density surrounding us is to show how much of a step down we are from the existing density, so you can understand why that transition is there. Finally, just a couple of other items from the letter, and again, I'm not gonna go through all the comments that were there, because you've seen it. But I thought one of the most interesting ones, which I'll admit, until Mr. Marley identified, I hadn't thought of it that way. He identified, and I quote, that single-family homes make up the majority of the development's immediate neighbors. Practical answer is it's not true. Most of our immediate adjacent neighbors, including across Main Street, live in townhomes and multifamily homes. There are roughly 12 or 13 single-family homes that are immediate neighbors, and there are more than 40 townhome and multifamily homes near us. We have, we respect those groups. Say it was interesting that at our meeting this week, I had more people from the surrounding, the multifamily and townhomes in that meeting, I believe, than I had from the other side. There were only 6 people there, but we appreciated that they were. Another question was raised about the economic impact of the project, and I recognize that sometimes, because all of you and I and the staff deals with this a lot, people think that economic impact is a standard here. It's not. It's a standard in special uses. But we have been told from day one that the village wanted to see this developed as a for-profit entity, so it was taxable. And we've identified that in excess of $300,000 in real estate taxes would be generated from this. By the way, that's versus zero. So, you know, we actually think it may be somewhat more than that, but part of it is, even though there's been no evidence to refute that, the statements were made under oath about that, it's also not a standard. We've identified it because we knew that that was something that you wanted to know about. I think at this point, what I'd like to do is turn this over to our architect. We initially, and I don't know that you ever received them, we initially submitted about 15 modified plans. Based on talking to staff, we were able to reduce that down to just 3 modified plans. I'm gonna ask our architect to walk through those and also to provide some additional information on what you saw in the video previously presented.
Thank you, Mark. Good evening, everyone. My name is Mike Giron. I'm the president of Fitzgerald Associates Architects. Happy to be here tonight to talk with you about some of the changes that we've made to the site plan and the proposed development at 4600 Main Street. As Mark said, we've learned a lot through our conversations with the community about some of the things that are most important to them, as well as pointing out a couple of things that we needed to address. One of the things that we believe was unclear in our previous site plan was just how much of a setback there is along the building faces of each of the townhouse buildings. Along Main Street, there's actually a 4-foot setback, which we've tried to enhance by changing the color slightly in the site plan to show that the faces of these buildings are not flat. Along the interior and along Kenton Kilpatrick, it's a 2-foot setback. There's just a little bit less space for us to deal with. We couldn't make the 4-foot setback accommodate all of the other requirements of the site plan. We've got a detailed sheet that I'll be able to show you that in a little bit, but there's so many things about the site plan, I just want to focus on this plan while I talk about a couple other things. One of the items that was pointed out to us was how much pervious and impervious area do we have in the plan. We had in excess of 70% impervious area because of all of the drive lanes, the sidewalks, as well as the buildings on the site. You'll notice that in the site plan, the top fire lane that's required for access around all of the townhome buildings is now shaded in a brown color. We are changing that to pervious pavement in order to reduce the amount of impervious area that we have on the site. This is all in an effort to address stormwater management. This will be in addition to the stormwater tanks that we will have under all of the other drive lanes that will collect all the stormwater that we've been working with our civil engineer, Erickson Associates, and the village staff to make sure that we're dealing with the 10 minutes of a 100-year rainstorm event. We are additionally adding those same permeable pavement areas to the guest parking spaces that are near the clubhouse, so that those areas are sort of designated with a different color than the rest of the pavement to try and offset them and make them a little more obvious as to what they are. And then in some of our conversation about sustainability, there were a couple of different plant materials that were raised that we wanted to make sure everyone knew that we've been addressed. Actually, when we conferred with our landscape architect, they were very well aware that drought-tolerant grass is a real vital plant species these days. We've all seen our lawns burn out too much in the hot summers. That is in our specification for all of the lawn area. There were also a number of trees that were asked to not include because of their lack of climate resistance. And our landscape architect, again, quite agrees they're not on our plant species list. All of the trees that we're proposing are ones that the village approves, as well as their climate pervious and pervious areas. It shows you where we have all of the impervious area along the fire lane at the north end of the property, as well as the guest spots along around the clubhouse in the center. And then this plan just refers back to our current proposed elevations, and I'll talk about that in a second, as well as showing you the setbacks, as well as how these plans are divided. So the red lines show where that demising wall would occur between the different townhouses, and then you can see that they're paired and then they're offset, either at 2 feet or 4 feet, proud of their neighbors to give some of that texture to each of the buildings. We have heard loud and clear that these building elevations are less than desirable from aesthetic perspective. We have presented some sketches of an alternative. We're still working on that. We intend on bringing new elevations to the Appearance Commission should we be able to go back to the Appearance Commission. And at that time, we'll talk more about the details of the architecture.
Before you switch the video, could you go back one slide? As we said, we appreciate, while we'd always looked at the impervious surface of the project, we appreciate that it was one of the community members who also discussed this with us, along with the grasses and trees. We were really proud to know and to tell her and for her to hear that these were all things we were looking at, and the good thing was, from landscape, from grasses and trees, we were excluding the trees she wanted us to exclude already, and including the grasses she wanted us to approve. But can you also walk through some of the, just real quick, the other stormwater improvements we've done here, which are tied to why we've asked for the zoning relief?
Oh, yeah, no, I mentioned that. The
Okay.
stormwater tanks under each of the private drives. Yeah, yeah. No, there will be a tank, in a tank, while we haven't exactly specified, it could be gigantic concrete pipe, it could be precast concrete boxes, there's some other materials that can be used as long as MWRD and the village approve them, that are designed to hold water and slowly release it into the stormwater system to not overburden that system. And that will be located in each of the private driveways, as a way to centrally collect it so that we don't have a lot of additional piping. There'd be a storm sewer there anyway, so instead of it being this big, some of them would be this big. And then lastly, we wanted to share a site video that we created. You've seen a video that the community has created that lacked landscape. We did a survey photo survey of the surrounding site and documented where trees and shrubs and plantings are, as well as putting it into the architecture that we had from our designs, as well as the contextual architecture that we were able to model. And so just want you to enjoy this. It is, there's a scrolling bar at the bottom that will tell you where you're looking at each moment in the video, so I'm not gonna narrate, I'm just gonna let you watch this. It's about 2 minutes long.
motion sickness while watching this. Again, we did in addition to having our land survey, that identifies where all the trees are, we did a photographic site survey, as well as, remodeled the neighborhood in order to put all of that together. We think it's a very accurate, depiction of what the neighborhood will look like should this proposal get approved. Happy to answer any questions you have.
We believe, and obviously we hope you will too, that the developers' significant, truly atypical compromises, willingness to accept material financial impact, the amount of time and effort we have spent over a year and a half working with the village and with the community members, the significant reduced density as a result of those discussions, there's significant reduced height, limiting all the multifamily, and other efforts to address the stated needs of the community members speaks for themselves. We recognize, I'm straightforward on this, I've been doing this for 35 years. We will never please everyone, but we hope that you will see all the efforts that we have done to meet those requirements. And we respectfully request that the Planning Commission recommend approval of this project. With that said, while I do have my development team here, we're available to answer any questions you have. I'm going to cut this short. I think the rest of our information you've got. You have extensive documentation from us on the project. You've heard this in multiple public hearings, and you've seen our documents. So, again, we thank you, and we're happy to respond to any questions you have.
Any questions of the developer? Commissioner Ross?
Can you go over the deed restriction again?
Sure. So essentially, the R4 district has those 4 uses. I will try and bring it back up here again. Great. Has those 4 uses. Off the top of my head is obviously multifamily that are not allowed in R1. It's congregate care facilities. It's standalone parking facilities. And parking is principal use. We will record a restriction against the property. Honestly, I think it was a great suggestion from the community. It was one we hadn't honestly thought about because our focus is on our development. We will record, and we're happy to accept a condition, we're making sure that we're required to do so. After we acquire the property, we will record a restriction to not allow any of those uses on the formerly R1 property. So whether it's a year from now or 100 years from now, that formerly R1 property will not be allowed to be multifamily.
Thank you.
Any questions of the petitioner at this point? Okay,
Thank you.
thank you. All right, at this point, I'm gonna open up the floor to, comments pertaining to their new changes and their new, well, let's say changes, in their plan. I also want to remind everyone in the audience that this commission, the purpose of this commission is to review plans that are submitted by the developer or a developer for approval. And in which case, those are the plans that we look at, and those are the plans that we decide on. The developer has a legal agreement with the owner of the property to present their plan to the Plan Commission. And this commission cannot and will not look at other plans submitted by people who do not have a legal standing with the owner of the property. Because it could be a detrimental against the wishes of the property owner, and it also could damage the purpose of the agreement between the owner and the developer. So with that in mind, who's gonna come up first? I believe Charles Tinker is first on the list, but are you Mr. Tinker, or? No? Okay. All right, so Ken Marley, Mr. Marley, would you please come up? So, Mr. Marley, do you understand what I've said about alternate site plans?
I understand what you say, and my response is that the community is not asking you to vote up or down on what the community views as a more palatable solution. It is merely provided as a general indication of what we view a more palatable solution to be.
Well, that's not our purpose. Okay, our purpose right now is solely with this case.
Sure, but rezoning of the property from R1 to R4 is part of the purview of the commission and of the village board. And the fact that what is proposed by the petitioner is of higher density than currently allowed, that's part of the argument for why we are presenting that information. So I understand where you're coming from, and I hope that you understand where we are coming from.
I understand, but again, you know, you could say that you feel that the zoning change isn't appropriate. But other than that, I think that's the limit of your statement.
We think that the zoning change is inappropriate.
If you think it is inappropriate,
I think it is inappropriate to change the zoning.
okay, that's fine.
And it's also stated in the letter that is joined by, I'm going to, if you allow, we collected signatures against that letter. This includes comments from anyone who chose to provide comment as well. That's why I want to provide this to the commission for their consideration.
That's fine. No, I'm gonna allow you to make the
already seen it.
presentation, but we might ask you to move on, you know, move on the slides.
Yep,
Okay.
please ask us when to do so, and we will do our best to
I
accommodate.
believe that was included on our packets.
Yes. Okay.
All right, so first of all, I would like to pass these, may I pass these down the line? I think I only printed enough for the commissioners, so commissioners only, please. Whew. Do I need to be sworn in? Do we need to do a group swear-in?
No,
Okay. Well, for the
basically
record,
because these are your opinions and, you know, that's,
but still, I'm gonna be presenting testimony that, to the best of my knowledge, is
whose
accurate.
testimony?
My testimony,
Based on what?
based on my interpretations of village code.
That's fine.
Okay.
Yeah, as long as you're not using statistics from, you know, so-and-so firm or, in other words, if the comments are yours and yours alone, that's fine.
Okay. Well, good evening. For those who don't know, my name is Ken Marley. I'm a resident of Skokie, 13 years on Elm Terrace. And let me just say that the course of this presentation is a little bit off the cuff at the moment, as you probably understand. First of all, I would like to point out that Mr. Gershon had characterized the letter as my letter. You did not receive my letter. You received from me a letter that was the work of the community. And again, I submitted on behalf of the 97 names that you have before you now, and I submitted on behalf of the over 100 people who have now signed on to that petition. So again, it's not my letter, it's our letter, and I appreciate that you want to give me that credit, but it's not my work alone. That said, regarding the letter, and Mr. Gershon's comments, there were a number of mischaracterizations that he made of our letter, and I asked the commissioners to again do a reread of what was presented. He mischaracterized, for instance, the complaints that we had regarding impermeable surfaces, for an example. we did not mean that as an indication of a concern generally of, oh geez, is there enough water getting into the soil in the neighborhood? It was a concern of how much overbuilding is being performed in the community, in the neighborhood. That 72% of the area is going to be brick and concrete. That's our concern. He also mischaracterized the statement regarding the neighbors around the area. We did not state that there are more single-family residents around the property. We stated simply that the majority of the boundaries around the subject property, 61%, the majority of the boundaries are adjacent to single-family homes. So that was a mischaracterization. As I mentioned briefly at the front, our plan is not a substitute for their work. It was an example. I'm not going to drag that through the mud any further than we need to. But it's more palatable to us, and it's in closer keeping with similar townhome developments that are in R1, R2, R3, and R4 zoning that have in-unit parking and that are similar in nature to what petitioner has proposed. Finally, before I get into the slides, and again, I apologize for taking so long on the top. Finally, I'm a little bit at a loss for words. I'm troubled that the petitioner, had access to our information, but we've not been given access to their information. We've seen a lot of what they presented, but the video that was shown tonight, which I don't think is as compelling as they believe it to be, we were not given that. We were also not given access to village staff to provide commentary on the content of our letter. I guess that's the other thing that troubles me too, that village staff and the petitioner are talking about our work behind our back. Sorry, that's a bad turn of phrase, but that we're not involved in that discussion. And if there's going to, I think the community would appreciate there being clarification on the manner in which the village thinks that we have inaccuracies. All that out of the way, if you'll allow it, I'll proceed through the slides that we have. I don't see much need to spend a lot of time talking about what we saw last month versus this month. Same number of units, same density, single-story clubhouse, no decrease in density. 68 townhouses has been told to be the minimum financial viable number to us. And I find it coincidental, perhaps, that also is the maximum number of units that can be built per R4 designation. I guess you'd call it kismet. There's also been no increase in parking, and the property lines and offsets remain the same. So again, what changed is the conversion of portions of the driveway to permeables. We've been told that they're going to take fences down around the postage stamps in the corner, and that there's a consideration of alternate facades. Next, I want to talk about our reading of the village code, and again, I welcome other people's interpretations of it. There is a 32-foot maximum height per building code for townhouses, and I understand that, from Mark's presentation, that there is a provision for parapets that does not count against that. And I don't want to get into it now, but I would love to get into it with anyone who'd love to talk about it. My reading of the definition section of the village ordinance, it would not allow you to exclude those based on my, again, amateur admitted reading of the village code. The other thing that was a little bit troubling to us is the deceptive manner in which they present their height. Even if top of roof is at 32 feet, the images as provided are clearly out of scale and do not present that information to any Joe Schmo on the street. The R4 section of the code also says there's a 2-story limit. Well, they submitted 3 stories. And it's not you know, the fact of the matter is, you can submit for these variances, for these allowances. They just haven't done it, and, you know, I don't know what that says about their interest in, you know.
I'm sorry, could you go back one
Yes.
slide for just a moment? Thank you. All right, thank you.
There's also a code provision regarding minimum lot widths. Village code has a 25-foot minimum for townhouses. Petitioner's plan does not satisfy that in all locations. The townhouses themselves are 20 and 22 feet wide, and depending on how village staff and the commission wishes to interpret that, that means they either have a system-wide problem or they have a problem along Main Street. But there is a problem. There's also a 25-foot minimum for front yards for R4 zoning. Minimum front yard shall not be less than 25, except that multiple family structures shall have a minimum of 20 foot. And along Kenton and Kilpatrick Avenue, petitioner has submitted 21 foot and 21 foot 8, which is less than code minimum. Impermeables, no really, we were kind of in agreement about what those numbers looked like and where they are today. Still in excess, still not called out on their permit application. Required parking spaces, you know, I think that it is still important to see what the floor plans for the units are to make sure that the village definitions are met. And I realize that, you know, they'll say that they can do they'll keep to the 3-bedroom, 2-bedroom designations, but I think that we would just appreciate a little more meat to it, a little more proof of it on the front end. The snow removal plan, as submitted to the village, calls for storing cleared snow along the nearest guest parking area, which would clearly eat into the available guest parking. And furthermore, according to their written statement, they won't even truck it off-site until they've filled every space. Until the parking area cannot fully accommodate the excess will be hauled off-site. Proposed density is in far excess for the majority of the neighboring properties. As I mentioned up top, 61% of the property lines are adjacent to R1 and R4 zoning. What they presented on earlier this evening, they cherry-picked a couple of the larger multifamily houses, multifamily properties across the street. Yeah, there might be one that's 44 units per acre. There might be one that's more or less. On average, on the south side of Main Street, when you average it out, it's 30.1 acres. And I know that's not the same as in the R1 and R4 regions, which are 5.4, 5.6, 6.3, 7.7, but it's also highly convenient to ignore the fact that it's significantly less than the numbers that they did speak to you tonight. The other thing interesting to note is that by the way that they've arranged their units, there's going to be a 16.7 unit per acre density in the current R4 zone, which would be within R4 density limits, but the region which is currently zoned for R1 has a density of 17.9 acres per unit, which is in excess of even the R4 limits. In the interest of being fair to Mark, I'm going to skip this slide. So, this is the list of the problems that we've identified with the existing plan. The non-obvious 35-foot height, again, it's not obvious by any casual review of the plans, and it's only in speaking in private conversations that we learned that they were putting a 3-foot parapet on top. 3-story limit, lot widths, front yards, impermeables. The snow removal plan is insufficient, and the unit density, again, by some stroke of luck, their minimum number of viable units is equivalent to the maximum number allowed to be placed there. And that's all I have for my presentation. Sarah Franks would be able to speak next unless Commission wishes to ask any questions of what was just presented.
I have a question. You mentioned that 72% will be brick and concrete.
I'm speaking colloquially there.
Okay.
To say building roof, concrete, whether it's concrete pavers or concrete driveways, sidewalks.
Okay. Do you know what the percentage is currently now with the school there?
I know that the amount of grass space is 49%. And, there's also hard surfaces like basketball courts, things of that nature that are also in the play areas. The hard surfaces are 4%. So between hard surfaces that are, for the students, for the kids, and green space, that's over 50%.
Thank you.
Ms. Franks?
I have a question, sorry.
Yes.
How does this list compare to the list that was provided last we addressed this issue?
At last month's meeting?
Yes.
Similar in length. I think we had 95 names last month, and this has 97 written on it. And as I mentioned before we started, we got over 100. This was the list as of, I'm going to say 2 p.m. this afternoon.
Okay, so this has additions.
It would have additions to it.
Okay, and then related to that,
Commissioner, could you pull your microphone down?
Sorry, it only has 2 settings, I think, which is up and all the way down, but we'll see. It's staying, that's good. I guess I'm curious as to, is there any additional context you can give us? Because if you read the individual comments, and some of them did look familiar to me, there are certainly some negative comments in here. There's 1 or 2 that actually seem to be supportive of the project, and then there are a collection of others that state a concern but don't explicitly articulate a positive or a negative.
Sorry.
So I guess my question is, what was the context in which someone is signing this?
I can provide, if the commission so wishes, I can provide the link for the online petition itself, which has a statement that says, please sign this petition if you are in agreement with this letter, and then a copy of the letter provided. And please provide any additional commentary that you would wish on top of agreement to the letter. So these are all, the names themselves represent general agreement with the letter developed by the community.
Okay.
Ms. Franks?
Thank you very much.
Good evening. My name is Sarah Franks. I'm a homeowner on Elm Terrace. I am presenting a review of one community developed compromise plan that outlines an improved development that better meets village code, is more consistent in its density with the surrounding neighborhood, and provides additional green recreational space, privacy for residents, and parking to meet the needs of the households that will be living in the development. I would like to direct your attention to the current proposed 68-unit development of 24 3-story units and 44 3-story units, each with a 20 and 22-foot garage for each unit, respectively, and a 1-story, 2,560 square foot clubhouse in the middle. Note the large amount of structures and tight boundaries between the townhouses and edges of the property at the north, south, east, and west ends. This community developed compromise plan.
Miss, could you move on? We're not looking at this plan.
You would like to not look at it?
Yes,
May I speak?
you can speak, but we're not gonna look at this plan.
This community developed compromise plan, which was chosen from a
Could
selection
you
of
move on to the
alternative
next slide,
plans
please?
based on feedback from the community, is depicted
Ms.
here.
Franks,
This is feedback from the community. It is
I'm
not-
asking you to move the slide. I didn't ask you to stop talking.
To what section should I move the slide?
whatever the next slide is.
Okay, back to the previous slide, and I would just like you to envision a hypothetical scenario in which you now see you see here 58 three-story units and a three-story clubhouse. This represents a decrease of 10 units from the developer's proposed plan.
Again, is this
Note the difference
the
in
developer
density
slide,
between
or
the two plans.
is this your slide or developer slide?
This is the developer slide.
This is the present
This is
slide,
the developer slide.
the present one.
Right,
This is the
right.
present
When you
slide.
look at the
And I'm
developer
asking you to
slide,
envision,
Okay,
right, developer slide, and you're discussing
Yeah.
hypothetical.
What?
I understand.
Hypothetical.
I got it.
am I allowed to speak? Thank you. With the proposed plan that you see in front of you, the main concern of the community is the high density of the development. It's currently at 17.3 units per acre, which is out of proportion to a majority of the surrounding neighborhood and is in far excess of the density currently allowed on the R1 zoning district that makes up over 60% of the lot. The community has stated its concerns and made multiple requests to the developer to consider a reduction in density. The developer has summarily dismissed the request for a reduction in density, claiming that 68 units is the minimum financially viable number. The plan they present tonight gives no additional consideration to a reasonable informed suggestions made by the community on how to better match the surrounding properties. Again, I'd ask you to take a look at this plan and envision a scenario in which the alternative plan would present 14.8
we cannot
units
entertain
per
looking
acre.
at alternate
It
plans.
accommodates 58 three-story units total, made up of 18 three-story units and 40 three-story units, each with a 20 and 22-foot garage for each unit respectively. This represents a very modest reduction of only 15% and is still in excess of what current zoning would allow. I'd ask you to take a look at the northeast and northwest corners of the recreational space, which represents 1,700 and 1,870 square feet respectively. To put the size of these recreation spaces into context, they are about the size of the room we are in tonight. Thank you, Ken. Again, the community developed compromise plan adds a significant amount of usable recreation space that is more readily accessible by more townhouse units and serves as a natural transition from the townhouse units to the street. Again, the community developed compromise plan calls for a reduction of only 10 units from the developer's plan in order to provide this increased amount of usable recreational space. Another set of concerns raised by the community to the developers are the tight boundaries to tall buildings, which reduces privacy and is visually unappealing. The plan submitted by the developers shows that the windows of tall buildings will be facing the neighbors and the residences directly below, with little to no space allowed for privacy. Parking. The community has requested that additional parking be added to the development, and the developer has not been willing to concede on this request at all. The community has voiced what is problematic about the current provision for guest parking, including 1, it only allows for 22 guest spaces for 68 townhouse units. The guest parking is scattered, with only 4 spaces at the northeast and northwest ends of the property, and 1 space if each of those is allocated as an electric vehicle charging station, further reducing the amount of regularly usable guest parking spaces. The remainder of the 13 guest parking spaces are located near the clubhouse, which is in the middle of the diagram. It should also be noted that their submitted snow removal plan calls for plowing snow into guest parking spaces until they're full. The community developed compromise plan allows expanded centralized guest parking located at the northern end of the property, set along the north end of the property line adjacent to green space and recreation areas. And if resident and guest parking problems bleed into surrounding neighborhood, there's room to expand guest parking on site. Any questions?
So to summarize all of your hypothesis, it is that if the developer were to reduce the number of units and thereby the density, there would be more room for moving, for recreational space, for setbacks, for parking. So it's all about the economics of those 10 units, it seems. The developer wanting the 68 units that they proposed, and the community saying if you reduced the economics and the number of units,
If
the
they
community
reduce
could
the-
have a better product. I understand that's what I'm hearing from your testimony. It's all about the 10 units, because that then changes everything. 10 units
And
down.
the density and the economics are tied together, but as you can see, the density also is tied to other factors that affect the usability of the property as far as recreation space, parking, and privacy.
The other
Which
thing,
I don't know how you would translate that economically.
okay, I understand.
Do we have another speaker or?
Yes, we do?
Hi, I'm Tim Mukin. I'm an 8-year resident of Skokie, hoping to live here another 20, 30 years. I love this village. Thank you for your time and for the leeway to have a full conversation. I'm here to talk about comparable developments that already
Would you
exist
please-
in Skokie.
Can't hear, can you
Yeah.
speak?
I'm here to talk about comparable developments that already exist in Skokie that are comparable to the proposed plan. They're all 2 to 3-story townhouses with detached garages, and they're all located in different zones. Some are in R4, R2, and even one in R1. The first development is Lincoln Ridge Townhomes, right? It has the same number of units as the proposal, but the lot is about an acre larger, which leads to an acceptable density of 11.9 per acre instead of the 17.3 that is the proposal. It includes 68 units like the proposal, but it has 50 guest parking spots instead of the 22, I think is in the proposal. And each unit has a driveway for additional parking. You can see the development right there. We're also talking about Kingston Estates. It's a smaller, but it's about the same size as the 4600 Main lot. It's 46 units as opposed to 68 units. The density is about the same as Lincoln Ridge. 23 guest parking spots. So for about 16 less units, almost 20 less units, they have 1 additional guest parking spot.
Mr. Mukin, if I may ask you a question, where are you getting this information?
Google Maps.
Okay, that's fine.
Just straight up, like,
Because you're testifying kind of outside of the scope of a lay witness, you know, you're giving very technical numbers.
Thank you.
That's why I'm asking you the source, so your source is Google and what else?
County data.
Okay, I just want the commission to understand that.
Both of these estates, townhouse developments do not exist next to residential neighborhoods primarily. Kingston does touch on 4 houses at the very bottom. The next 2 estates, and this is what Kingston looks like. The next 2 estates are Laramie and College Hill. Laramie's in an R2 district, College Hill's in an R1 district. Both of them have residential neighborhoods. You can see Laramie is across the street from single-family homes, and College Hill is surrounded on all 4 sides by single-family homes. But there is a street separating all of them, all of the townhouses. Both of them are significantly less dense. In a residential neighborhoods, the Laramie unit is 10.9 units per acre, and the College Hill is 9.2 units per acre, which gives you a guidance on what acceptable density for a townhome development in a residential neighborhood has been in Skokie. And we're looking at a proposal at 17.3, which is a lot larger than what's already been built and has been happily existing in Skokie. So we want to talk about, I was just here to show you what's there and what the compromise is. That 68 units is the financially viable number, equates to the maximum allowed development, which, as Ken said, is kismet for the developer. But there are ways to make a better development, with less dense development, something approaching College Hill, Laramie Park, or one of the other units in this area within Skokie that already exists. Does anybody have any questions on that? And Commissioner Berman, you had it exactly right in your comment last. The last thing, here's a comparison between the two. On average, those 4 townhouses are at 11 units per acre, and the proposal's at 17.3. The last thing we wanted to talk about was tax implications, and this is something that we really don't have a lot of visibility into. It's between the village, between the developer, but we've heard a lot from the village about how the revenue is important and why this development needs to happen is because of the revenue. So we compared what the taxes are provided on a square foot basis by all the surrounding neighborhoods and estimated what that townhouse would provide is 258 square foot. As proposed, that's what it would provide. If it was reduced to what we couldn't show you earlier, which is just a hypothetical, it would be $2.42 per square foot, which is a 6% difference. The revenue difference between a 17.3% dense development and a 15 or 14 or 13 is not significant enough. You have any questions on that? The last one is the current zoning. It's just what the taxes would be if you kept it at R1 and it was single-family homes built identical to Elm Terrace, and the R4 is multifamily with the existing proposal. It's a bigger difference, 16%, could be significant, but at the 6%, a slight reduction in density shouldn't be very impactful on village revenues. That's all I had right now. Any other questions? Thank you.
Thank you.
I have a question.
Yeah.
And I
Yes.
think this is more for staff possibly. Is there any regulation about density when it comes to townhomes? Is that part of any village ordinance? Or is it just a matter of less is preferable to some and more is preferable to others?
We're regulated by the zoning, so all the different factors of the front yards, the rear yards, the side yards, that regulates. There's no the village does not have a specific policy that would regulate.
So, so if they meet the village code, which is applicable, then the developer can proceed with the.
And if the board approves their site plan approval, if it requires site plan approval, because it's over an acre.
But my, when I see there is some townhouse, width of the townhouse, how does it, what they are saying and what the code says, does this code meet that requirement? Because see, 21 feet, 25 feet, there is big difference. If it doesn't meet, they have to meet the code requirement.
So I think there's some confusion over what the width of a structure is versus the lot. A lot, and I'll let our planning manager, Paul Reese, take this. So.
I was gonna ask that question, because that's the only point of difference. 68 is not the magic number, it's the 22-foot versus 25-foot width, and the setbacks, those are the two issues.
Right, so,
And height.
on the
Height
unit
was
width,
comparable.
or the lot width, as it comes up in the code, this is considered one big lot. Those
20 and 22 foot wide, units aren't what we calculate, for the lot width. That's why we're using site plan approval, on this. And then, the setbacks likewise, so there are, requirements for front, rear, and side yard setbacks, but in this case, Main Street is your front setback, so Kilpatrick and Kitten aren't considered, as front yards for the zoning.
What about the stories?
How about?
Yeah, so the stories, so the height is unfortunately, slightly poorly written in the code. It's a little bit confusing, but it's a 32 foot or 2-story maximum, right? So it's the either of those two things, right? So whatever is the
Are you using International Building Code, IBC, or your own code?
So there's two,
Because you have adopted IBC, isn't it? Skokie has adopted IBC,
we're in the international code. So, yeah.
International Building Code,
So,
right?
right,
Okay.
so, the first step in any development is to go over the zoning and get site plan approval. And then the next, if this project were to receive approval and then they move forward and they seek a building permit, there are pages upon pages that tell us where electric outlets and plumbing and the load of the walls and where the roof is. And that project is then checked again for conformance with the zoning code, but also making sure that it follows our building code, the adopted building code. And so from time to time, the village will update the code based on the best building practices. The Village of Skokie is on a 6-year cycle, so we update our building code every 6 years. But the building codes are not in conflict with our zoning codes. We spend several months, right before my arrival, the previous community development director worked to adopt that code. So that code was already in place, and they review to make sure that those codes are not in conflict with the village code. And if there were conflicts, there's what is called local amendments to the building code, and we make suggestions of this. But these are standardized codes. They're not necessarily specific to Skokie.
The question was, I think, mostly about the 32 versus 35, whether it included or did not include the parapet. So we see this as 32 or, so the or is the important word here, not the two numbers. So 32 we're going to use as the operative number,
Right.
then talk about the parapet.
Yeah,
And
so
why
the-
that's
Right, just
inarticulately written, perhaps.
See, in general, like 32 feet is the parapet is not counted as a building structures.
It is not
Is
counted.
not counted in general, whatever, as per my understanding, I am myself a structural engineer, they are generally not counted unless specified in the code.
Yeah, that's correct. That's applicable here. And I just wanted to confirm the confusion between the 32 foot or 2 stories. It's the higher of the two, and so
Yes.
we've ran that through the zoning administrator and confirmed that's how it's interpreted, and there's precedent for that.
And then better explain a little bit to us why the width of the building is not the same as the width of a lot. We see,
Right, so the code talks about zoning lots, right? And
Yes.
in this case, it's the entirety of the property, so the one.
so we take the property, we divide by the number of units?
No,
How do we
it's-
See,
Right,
if
so
you
it's-
make a development and you want to sell this lot, because you are going to sell the development as a lot. Say, so the lot should be 25 feet for one unit.
Yes.
But they are not selling as a unit, they are using it as a whole one structure.
If these were condos, it would be a different consideration.
Right, if it will be condo units, then they have to put 25 feet as a town because they are selling a lot.
But these are not individually
These are
sold
not
lots.
individual
They're not
selling
fee
a lot.
simple lots.
Yes.
It's one large project.
One
Therefore,
large project.
the dimension, the width of each townhouse is unimportant. Whether it could be 18 feet, because it's not important to the discussion. Is that what we're saying?
That's what we're saying.
That there is no width requirement on a
I don't want to say
rented
there's no width.
townhome.
I'm saying that these are appropriate.
We're comparing apples to granola bars,
there's
because they're
not-
just not, because the definition of the lot width is the minimum horizontal distance between the side lot lines of a lot measured at the narrowest width of the defined buildable area. So it's not the structures, it's the envelope that's created by the buildable area.
And each of these is not a lot.
Correct.
No,
Because
because they
we're
cannot.
not subdivided.
But in future, in future it can happen that these guys can sell a individual unit, making converted into condominium, then it may not qualify at that time.
Then they would have to come back to
Right,
us,
then they have
to us and the zoning
subdivision.
probably both, to get an exemption
Right,
to sell
exemption
what
to
they,
sell
what
it,
was
make
too
a
narrow.
lot.
Okay, and then why, tell me one more thing, why the setbacks don't count on the two side streets? As you said, they do count for Main, but they
Oh, I
don't
didn't
count
say,
for the K streets.
It's not that they don't count as a front yard. Because, like,
I see 6 units here and 6 units there.
sure, that's the front yard for those specific units, right, as we would call it, like you walk out your street, but in the zoning consideration, the front yard is Main Street.
And where is that defined?
Oh, because the entire project still, each unit is not being considered neither in its width nor in its individuality. It is the entire project.
Yeah, we're evaluating the entire site plan.
And that's why those are side yards, even though they might be fronts to those units.
Say, suppose we don't call them townhouses.
Little
We
apartment
call
buildings.
buildings and apartments,
I got it.
then it will qualify all the code requirements.
I got it. Okay.
And if I may, I'd like to ask a couple of clarifications.
I understand now I understand the difference between what the community people think and what the village staff is regulating. Okay,
So if regarding height requirements, we have an exclusive or in between them, does that mean that I could build a 2-story, 50-foot building?
Yeah, so I had this conversation with the zoning administrator, and technically, yes, you could have a basement that's partially above ground and 2 16-foot tall floors, and then be above the 32-foot. It doesn't happen, hasn't happened, but I'm just saying, technically, so, yes.
Does village have any, so I also work in the engineering field.
Let's, can we just move on and kind of just focus at the property at hand here?
All right, one more quick statement regarding the 25-foot widths. The property line is, we're 500, look at the top, we're 589 feet wide. You divide that number by 25 feet, they can't put that many properties on Main Street. It's still a bust.
because you're not individual. It's one big building.
And I might have to, again, talk about some definitions and plain text reading of language.
Pieces, but it's still
I
an
have
apartment
mutual
building.
time.
It's a rented apartment building. They don't have it, but that's what it is.
Okay. Anyone else come forward? Is there a Lisa Cleveland here?
Yes.
Yes. Okay.
All right, it's gonna be hard to follow.
I just need to give us your name.
Sure, Lisa Cleveland, I'm a resident of Elm Terrace as well. It'll be hard to follow with those fireworks, but I guess I'll try.
Speak a little more into the microphone.
Yeah.
Thanks.
There we go. All right. I know we've been here for quite a while tonight. It's, I think, getting quite heated on both sides, but for those of us from the community, we do really appreciate you hearing us out. I know we've been here for a few meetings, and what we hope this indicates to you is the vested interest we have in being a part of this process. I think we're gonna skip over some of these. We've pretty much exhausted all the facts and figures, and I think been over every quantity, under the sun today. But when we compare what the petitioner has put together with the vision that the community has for what this site could be, I hope one of the things that the commission takes away is that we really are not that far apart from each other, right? Commissioner Berman, you had noted the difference between 68 and something very close to it. So what that tells us as a community is that we only have a little bit of work left to do to meet at something that can accommodate the needs of a petitioner and the desires of a community to have a development that integrates well, not just with the site here, but with everything around it, right? We've looked at densities and building heights, and we really are still not that far apart. I think some of the things that, I'll skip over that, that have
frustrated the community is a bit of a perception of lack of transparency in this process. We've started this, 8, 9 months ago now, when letters went out to those of us that live near the proposed development. And at that point, we became incredibly engaged, and I would hope that it became clear to the Plan Commission, the Appearance Commission, and the Village Board as well, that there's a great deal of interest in what happens at this site. And what we had hoped is that this would be more of an active collaboration. And there have been presentations by both sides, we've come to meetings and discussed, but it seems like we've done a good bit of talking past each other rather than talking with each other, and active collaboration, which I think is what we're seeking to get to something that, you know, we can all live with. I don't think, like Mr. Gershon said, anyone is going to be fully happy with what comes out of this, but we can all find something that we can live with. I think the petitioner has asked for recognition for a good bit of reduction in the proposal that they have. I think the recognition that the community sees coming from that is from a wholly different perspective. There is a neighborhood here, it has a certain look to it, it has a certain density to it, it has a certain community to it. And had the original proposal been something more fitting with the layout of the neighborhood, the density of the neighborhood, the building composition of the neighborhood, this extensive process probably could have been shortened significantly with some active engagement much earlier in the process. So I think the community might argue, if we are perhaps not allowed to go into a good deal of detail about what our recommendations are, perhaps not so much credit should be given to the petitioner for starting in really quite a place out of character with the neighborhood to get to where they are now. We could have shortened the process significantly by perhaps working a little bit more closely together. So what we really want to take away from this is, one, to request that the commission tonight request that the village staff review some of the information that's here. It's quite clear that there is a bit of misunderstanding, perhaps on both sides of what the actual requirements are, and make sure that the transparency that the community is requesting is fulfilled. If we aren't understanding something, we would really like that to be, written down in the report to explain how some of these requirements either are met or if variances are required and why that's the case. What this process might allow over the review period is for some more active engagement between the community groups that you've heard from tonight and the petitioner. If this lengthy process has had economic impacts on what they can support on this development, perhaps that indicates that this isn't the development for this property. The areas where we are not very far apart on could be taken by another group as a set of lessons learned. They could potentially work with the community in a more active way and put together something that provides all the benefits that have been noted for this particular development: economic interest for the village, residents for the village, affordable housing, sustainable development, and done in a way that collaborates with the community and still provides the village everything it's looking for, just not today. Residential development in Skokie, as we've heard, is happening quite frequently. We talked last time about the numerous developments going up. Undoubtedly, there are other developers who would be happy to step in and work with the community to provide the village, the group selling the property, and the community what they're looking for. So I would say, in the interest of the community, this group that the development will be adjacent to, and which we would hope to bring them into, have them become a part of, we would look to work together more collaboratively with the developer that's proposing this new residential development. If that can't happen, please also don't discount the option of going with, another proposal in the future.
Okay, thank you. Next. May I just say a comment here? A lot of times, the owner developer will do a lot of the stuff in private and not even engage the village until the last minute. So they could be meeting for years prior to them coming to the village. So we're powerless to do that. I'm just letting you know.
and that's a fair comment, but I think we've been in several of these meetings now, and it's been known for quite some time that this is a quite followed development.
Believe me, we
So
actively,
there's
we
different
actively tell the developer and the owners to engage with the community, but it's up to them.
That's true, though if you know there are concerns with the development that's proposed that are coming from the community, I would expect it's certainly within your purview as a commission to postpone a decision until an agreement is reached. Right, the point I'm trying to make is we ultimately are not that far apart.
I understand, Okay, thank you.
I have to bite, I'm sorry. The reason why we're here tonight is because we deferred the decision, the last time this matter was before the board, and there was an amount of time, we could debate whether it was reasonable or not, but are you suggesting that you were incapable or the time was insufficient, or how would you categorize the use of that time? As it appears, if I understand you correctly, you're essentially suggesting that you need more.
What I'm suggesting, or I guess asserting rather, is that there wasn't active engagement. There was a presentation put together by the petitioner. People were called in to understand what the new proposal is. What I'm recommending and what I think the community has always sought is a working relationship to help come to a middle ground. And I don't think the process we've engaged in thus far of providing comments, waiting for those comments to say, be incorporated, and then back check those comments or provide alternate comments is working.
So, see, that is the question with the petitioner, because they have to engage. We can only tell them to engage, but we cannot force them to engage with the community until this project comes to the commission. And that's what we did in the last,
And that is
the
the
second
object of
meeting.
the commission, is to bring these,
See, we
projects
don't
before.
see this project because the building department or planning department look into this before we look at it.
Understand that, and I guess our response would be that if one cycle didn't work, then I think we need to try again until we are successful.
I have a question for both our planning director, Paul, and Johanna and Tyler, all of them. Can we, it would seem to be outside of our role to vote down a project that meets the economic need of the developer and meets the village's requirements for zoning and planning. So if those things are all met, that is, the developer brings an economically viable project, and it met all of the setback, height, width, requirements, I don't know how we can turn it down.
Well,
the que-
that's the decision we have to make.
No, but how,
No.
I don't think we have a decision to make once it meets all of those things. We're not talking about appearance, because appearance is the appearance commission, but if everything else is in front of us and meets requirements of our code, how can we say that it is rejected? Tyler, I guess that's more of a legal question than it is a
No, I
planning
hear what
question.
you're saying. I remember Matt Brandmeyer saying that 16P, for example, subdivision, wouldn't even come before boards when he was on a different town because it was granted as a matter of right. There's really no leeway for this board to deny a subdivision request as is presented. The site plan, if it meets the code, once again, if they meet the code, and if the board is arbitrary and capricious and denies that approval, they could take us to court and get a judge to perhaps reverse that. But the zoning map amendment, I assume there's discretion there, in that they're asking for relief in the change of a zone. There's more discretion on that front.
Only the zoning change, but not the planned unit development or the planned nature of it.
I see the most discretion with 15P, yes.
Well, and you should, the findings of fact and review of the standards is the key piece of your review. So that's the guidepost by which you should review the development and issue your opinion and recommendation to the board. As Chair Luke reminds us, this body is a recommending body, so you're providing your recommendations as this body to that group. And I would vest that in the review of the findings of fact.
And I would just only add that the economics of the developer isn't part of our review or concern. As staff.
Okay, Paul, could you, next person, please? And is this Art Lisner?
No.
Art Lisner, please? Or are you speaking for Art?
No, Art. No, Art. Better.
Okay, you yield to, and your name is?
Stephen Matu.
Okay.
I'm a resident of Elm Terrace. I'm here with.
Stephen Matuk?
Yes,
You're,
sir.
you're further down on the list. Is there a Carolyn Kushner here? You concede? Okay. Tom Whitaker? It's Tom Whitaker. Mr. Whitaker, do you want to come up and speak, or do you want to yield to?
I would like to, yes.
Thank you.
I'm not very tall, but I'll make an effort to lean forward into the microphone.
Could you give us your name for the record?
My name is Tom Whitaker. I'm a resident of Kilpatrick Avenue.
Thank you.
Thank you all for your time. I realize that many people have stayed here longer than they may have anticipated tonight. I appreciate the commission hearing our concerns. In the few years that my family's lived on Kilpatrick Avenue, we've found the RE Crown School to be good neighbors. The neighborhood is clean and tidy, and I think, to my predecessor's point, who put it more eloquently than I could, that there is a common ground that we can find. The 2 points that I would like to bring up in looking over the petitioner's proposed plan are related. With density comes traffic. And I would like to point out, for the purpose of the commission, that I find it, the report that they commissioned that said there would only be 30 cars coming and going each morning when there are a proposed 68 townhouses with 136 parking spots seems quite low to me. In addition, living across from the school, I do recognize that there is a significant amount of traffic during drop-off in the morning and pick-up in the afternoon, but I think it is worth for the commission to note that my neighbors, the school, are only in session roughly 2/3 of the year. So if we're talking about comparing apples to apples for purposes of the amount of traffic, you are replacing a school that observes religious holidays, observances, as well as an extended summer break. And you are, the petitioner is proposing replacing that with homes where people will be coming and going all day long, possibly in the evening, 365 days a year. The second point that I would like to bring to the commission in terms of the transparency with us working with the developer to share our concerns about the density is the original project, I believe in the appearance commission, was described as massive. It, 2 5-story apartment buildings, so that was changed. We were told to come together between the community and the petitioner, the developer, and we received a letter. I think that was done in either January or February of this year. We received a letter in July notifying us that the revised proposal was for 68 townhomes. Now, in some of the documentation that we were provided, there was a landscape architect plan, and that was revised for the 68 townhomes, and it was stamped as revised in April of 2023, meaning that this revised plan was not shared with the community to receive input from us for over 3 months. I don't think that's really in the spirit of transparency and cooperation when we're talking about trying to find a center ground. I believe that the school has a right to sell the property, to develop the property. They are the owners of it. I just question whether anyone who does not live in our neighborhood would enjoy having 68 townhouses put directly next to their home. Thank you very much.
Thank you. David Freer? Mr. Freer here?
I am David Freer. Some of what I'm gonna say is repetitious, redundant to what we've heard already.
Well, keep it short, I mean, if it's redundant.
I'll try. It'll take 4 minutes for me to read this. I hope you'll listen.
Okay.
Last month, I talked about the precedent your commission established in 2009 and about the desirability of eminent domain. Tonight, I want to comment on 3 things I heard last month. First, lawyer disclosed that his clients worked very hard here in Village Hall. Wow, they worked behind our backs in this public building for a full year. What work did they do? The spokesman for the Appearance Commission mercilessly trashed their work for 40 minutes before we even said a single word. And why would the mayor like the idea of 1 million new bricks on this little patch of land? Why? What's in it for him except to lose a couple hundred votes? Or did he hallucinate that constituents lined up at this podium to cheer for this madness?
Sir, could you just save those comments, those are political comments? Could
Yeah,
you just
I thought you were talking about opinions. I was
No,
happy you
no,
mentioned that.
but pertaining to the case,
Pertaining to what?
pertaining to the site plan approval.
Pertaining to what?
Site plan approval.
Or zoning, or?
Site- Okay. Anyway, I'll just finish this paragraph. This whole thing stinks. And I wonder, is the grafter Henry Crown smiling in his grave? All right, second, if you will, the figurehead declared, we need not worry about our property value. I ask, in what universe does the construction of rental apartments not devalue adjacent single-family homes? What universe? If this ugliness is to materialize, figurehead, that's the guy, I don't know his name, Shorty or whatever his name is, ought to put money where his mouth is, indemnify us, escrow $200,000 for each homeowner. By the way, I'm a rare surviving geezer on the block, and I'm speaking for the new demographic. These are young people who have spouses, children, careers, pride in their homes, and they also have mortgages. If you rubber stamp this plan for the figurehead and for the mayor, these young people will go underwater on their mortgages, and they don't deserve that. Finally, in answer to a question, the figurehead divulged no basements. Luxury townhomes, my ass. More like Cabrini Green row houses. Anyway, I picture move-ins with freezers for food, dining sets that don't fit quite right, extra sofas, you know, the things that go in basements. But now they'll occupy a space in the garage. And where will you find street parking for 70 cars? This reminds me of the shill who compared school traffic to apartment traffic, but didn't bother to mention the school generated 0 traffic half the year owing to vacations, holidays, and weekends. Commissioners, I really don't want that figurehead as the landlord next door. Please vote thumbs down. You'll walk out of here with your heads up. Thank you for listening. Got any questions? Maybe I'll answer them.
Thank you.
You're welcome.
Stephen Matuk?
Thank you. Again, my name is Stephen Matu. First thing I would like to thank all of my neighbors that did all of the work in making the argument against the development. And for the record, I don't want anybody to think that any of us are against Fitzgerald developing the property, putting up some nice homes, and turning a nice profit. No one is against that. But, you know, we're all adults, and most of us have been around the block, and we know when we're being bamboozled, right? And I don't want to use that, I'm not using that word lightly. You can play games with numbers and with you know, assessments, and when you make the parking, the traffic argument. 68 homes, assume what, 2, 3, 4 people per home? That's 200 to 400 people, increase in population in that small piece of land. You have Amazon trucks coming in and out all day, deliveries, Christmas, 4th of July. If 10 homes out of the 68 homes have a barbecue, where are they gonna park? Because when I have a barbecue, I got 5 cars parked in front of my house, 5, 6 cars. That's 60 cars. And I'm only saying 1/6 or 1/7 of the homes decide to enjoy their home on a holiday. There's nowhere to park. This 22 or 18 parking spaces is a joke. All the other townhomes that have been developed in Skokie knew that, and they took that into account. Double the parking with half the units, half the density. And then comparing the density, I mentioned this last month. You know, density of 17 point, what was it, 17.1? 3? That's 17.3 from 0, because the density now is 0 on that property. Not 9.6 or 15.2 as it is, or whatever the number is across the street. It's 0. So we're adding 17 point et cetera per acre in density to the neighborhood. The fact that they have to build tanks under each driveway for stormwater is a testament to the magnitude of this project and to the density of this project. It's not just, you know, well, the code says you gotta have half a parking space for each two bedroom. Look, nobody looks at that. We gotta think logically. And the fact of the matter is, there's not enough room. There's not enough room for parking. Traffic will be way higher when you have hundreds of more people occupying a currently vacant, 0 residential plot of land. If there's 2 cars per unit, that's 150 cars, right? As a off the top figure. 150 cars. 30 cars are gonna be moving out of 150 every morning? Or are 150 cars gonna be moving?
Okay.
It's, I'm sorry?
No, we've gone over the parking
And the
problems and it's.
Right, but we haven't gone over any logic though. Nobody mentioned the illogical argument. They can throw numbers up on a board and say, well, the code says 22 is plenty. But is anybody thinking? Or are we supposed to be just nodding our heads and smiling because they think they're within code? Or do we just bend the rules when it comes to height? Or they can interpret the things the way they want to interpret it because it's unclear in the code. I mean, we're the residents of Skokie. I'm a taxpayer. I pay almost $20,000 a year in property taxes. Everybody in this room that has made an argument is a taxpayer in Skokie. They are not. So I do believe we have a right to make logical arguments or common sense conversation, as opposed to saying, well, the code can be interpreted this way or that way to their benefit. I just think it's almost insulting, some of the statements that are being made. We were here in July, I believe, when we had when you guys deferred the vote for another month or so.
August 3rd.
Pardon?
August 3rd.
Well, August 3rd, thank you. So a month ago, you guys deferred it for us to communicate with the developer. Nothing has changed. They change the permeability of some of the parking spots.
Could you quickly come to, because we want to move on and have more people.
Okay, makes perfect sense. Thank you, Chair.
Yes, we have Lauren Gonecki.
Can I just ask the developer for clarification on a private communication that we had before I make my comment?
Now you can ask him after the meeting.
It was relevant to the comment.
Pardon me?
It's relevant to the comment.
Could you speak a little louder, Lauren?
It's relevant to the comment.
To speak to
Okay,
that,
okay.
you can
Speak
discuss.
to us.
You can
Okay.
speak to that in your comments.
First of all, I would like to thank Mark and Mike, is it? And the sustainability person who's not here, is it Charlie? I was the person who they talked to for over an hour. I was given more than twice the time that they had allotted for it because Charlie was enjoying our discussion so much about sustainability. And I appreciate that they were already going to put in the grass that I suggested. And what? They were already going to put in the grass that I suggested, and they are not going to put in the one species of tree I said please don't put in. I hope that they take the suggestions seriously for the trees I said do put in, and for changing the permeability ratio. I would love to see that expanded a bit. But I think that just in general, we need to start asking, what is the emissions impact of every development that we have, right? Because I was one of the people who spent months developing a sustainability plan based on a certain greenhouse gas inventory at the time. Now you're going to be adding 68 residences, and how is that going to impact our greenhouse gas emissions, and how far is this going to set us back in reducing our overall emissions by 35%? As far as the permeability goes, they said that, we're required to account for a once in 100-year plan, or once in 100-year storm. The problem is that once in 100-year storm, really what that means is a 1% chance annually of having a storm like that. But as the air gets warmer and it can hold more and more moisture before it dumps it all, that number is going to be more like a 1 in 10. So we need to make sure that we're keeping up when we say you need to account for the stormwater. We need to make sure our code reflects that, and I'm sure it doesn't, and I know that they're up to the current code, so we need to address that. I know that these townhouses are designed for people to largely work from home, and I think that's part of where the sorry, it's really distracting, but it's part of where the traffic in the mornings, this 30 car number during morning rush hour is coming from. But companies now, and this has changed since the plan was submitted, right? Since the buildings were developed. Companies like Google and Amazon and Salesforce and even Zoom are requiring that people come back to the office. So that 30 car number is obsolete now, and you have to account for that too. And I just found out about that like this evening, so it's not like to ambush you guys. So one of the main objections that I've always had to this plan is the exclusionary nature of it. The layout of this development is designed to keep out. I've been really polite to the other people who were speaking. Will you please be polite to me? Thank you. It's designed to be exclusionary. The layout of the development is designed to keep out people who don't live there. The clubhouse will have a fitness center and a party room and wine coolers. It makes sense to have those amenities in an apartment building where the tenants are their own community. But once you have townhousing, you have to walk out of your door. Now all of a sudden you're part of the larger community, and all of these things are designed to keep people inside this development and not have them engage with their neighbors. I called it a burbclave the last time I spoke to you, and I urge you to just take a little bit of, read maybe the first chapter or two of Snow Crash to see what I'm talking about. But that mentality of the kind of development is what I would like to portray. If the developer were to convert the clubhouse to a parking garage, especially if they had a green roof on it with public access, I would go sit down and never say another thing about this development other than yes, approve it.
Okay,
Right.
Lauren.
Maybe solar panels on the roof.
They already said no to that.
Okay.
Okay.
It's designed to support.
It's designed to support them. It's some
Anticipating that they might be needed.
Okay. So, there you go,
right. We
Lauren.
spent an hour discussing that. The answer was no, and we don't really have a way to determine when we're going to put them on. And then, who is living in these units? They're really designed, and they're not allowed to market to specific groups of people, but they're designed with a particular demographic in mind. These dual income, probably no children couples. These units are not suitable to families. And as far as affordability, they're offering, and it's very generous that they're offering $150,000 for 4 of the units as a fee in lieu, when they're not required to do that. Like, I acknowledge that they don't have to do that. But it's only gonna take 6 years and 3 months to make back that $150,000. And that is assuming 80% AMI for 40 years. Like if they were going to, have those units be affordable units instead. So 6 years really, and then you've made your money back. So why not just have the affordable units?
All right, Lauren, could you wrap it up?
It's hard to put a value on green space. And I think part of the issue and part of the rejection of some of the other proposals with a lot more green space is like, well, we can't charge people rent on that, so since we can't calculate its value, we're just gonna ignore its value. And I think that this is not a slam to this particular developer. We need to put that into our comprehensive plan, which we need to completely rewrite. Thank you.
Okay, thanks, Lauren. Cecilia Steinet?
Want to say that one more time? I'm not sure I'm not sure.
Celia Steinet. Okay. Togi Tuhula. Okay. Arlene Stennett. Rachel Vahozy? Van Hoozy.
Hi, Rachel Van Hoos. Sorry, I never have notes. First, I don't know who's paying $4,000 rent in Skokie. I went to the community meeting. I was one of the 6 people. They did tell me the 2 places in Skokie people pay that much. I don't see it happening on Main Street. What are you gonna do? Walk to the 7-Eleven and the Taco Bell? I mean, but it's unfortunate more community members didn't go to their meeting because what they presented, which may be like an alternative at the Appearance Commission, maybe, is like a 180 visually from, you know, everything you saw on the 2-minute tour around. What I saw the other night was something completely different that fit way more into the neighborhood. It's also unfortunate that we didn't get to see the community members' presentations. I'm not a part of that group. I did see the 4 plans and voted as such. I do think on the east and west streets, not being the front yard, the elevations there, which were in their plans, should be lower for those homeowners. The front along Main Street being those stories, the townhouses on the south, like, they're not gonna get shaded out. We all know about Lauren and the Zenith and everything. But some of their plans did have like just lowered elevations in certain buildings, which I liked. Overall, I don't understand what the original use of this land is or was by the county. Going back to the deeds in 7 and 1924, that it was not to be sold by the county, that it was all for educational use, that this was public lands. And in 1989, when the Northern School District 41 quit claim on the deed to these pins, both properties, for $10 to the school. The school then took out $2.1 million mortgage, which they probably needed for the school. And then, you know, all the public records available online after that is the Crowns and another entity just changing hands a slew of about every 3 to 7 years, arm's length transactions and remortgaging it. And I'm here to say that the Crown family has a legacy. This is
I'm not sure that this is, I have to step in.
No, I'm sorry.
This is not relevant.
The Crown
I don't care about the Crown family or who bought or sold the property. I'll tell you quickly that it was platted as a school, going back to Jeffersonian platting, when they set aside in each area of the United States areas for schools. But once they were no longer viable, they then could be sold off by the public body to whomever was to buy it. Sometimes it's a school, sometimes it's a private developer. But of no interest to me or to this commission is who that person was that bought it from the school district some time ago. And then to now pick on one person.
I'm not picking on that person. I adore the Crown
I don't
family.
care, the Crown
No,
is
no.
the-
I'm trying to make the point that I don't understand.
come to the
There's
point.
a difference between who owns this property and who the developer is. And your council is saying we have to respect their contract that they have in place. And whatever is being talked about with the village, it was a question. I didn't need to be, lectured about it. I want to know what the intent and purpose of this land is, and if it really speaks truly to the Crown's legacy.
That
That's all.
doesn't really,
No,
has
I
no
know
business.
it may be of no point to you, but to me, I feel like Skokie deserves. I could tell you about the land issues with my school district and the park district and how we have a need for open land for our parks and our schools. So it is a real concern. It didn't come out of nowhere. I have questions going back to that. Thank you for the lecture. You're always good for that.
I just wanted to ask a question about your testimony, if you don't mind.
Yes.
You indicated that there was a public meeting that you attended,
Yes.
and you found out about that meeting somehow. How? Could you articulate how you found out about that public meeting?
Because I'm involved in all things local Skokie.
Okay, and you said 6 people attended the meeting?
Yes.
Okay.
Yes, and that is what they told you. 6 people attended. We were there. I mean, I can tell you, like, what I saw, I wish you all saw. And the same goes for the community group. I wish you saw what they did. There's just more to the picture. And then I have my own opinion, which is that, I think the village has, I also question why it has a cage number, why they established one in March of 2023, and that allows the school to do business with the government, and I'm not really sure why that was established.
All right,
So,
I'd like to
Anyway.
call up,
thank you.
Ms. Khan, McCann? Is it Ali Khan? Thank you.
Hi, good evening. Ali Khan, resident of Skokie. Just want to comment really quick, the last person said about 6 people attending a recent meeting. That meeting was really short notice, so I think that's primarily the reason why not a lot of people attended, and it was probably 2 days ago, which I found out later on. But prior to that, there was another meeting with a huge turnout from the community, trying to engage. I think some speakers spoke about that and mentioned that we wanted to have a dialogue in that meeting, but it was more so a presentation and just, check boxes of what's important, what's not important, that kind of stuff. And then it wasn't really, we didn't really know what the agenda was for that meeting, but we went into that meeting with good intent. So anyways, that just wanted to comment on, so people don't think that the community is not engaged. The community is engaged, the community wanted to go into that meeting, and did at one point. This was the second meeting just 2 days ago, which I didn't have opportunity to go to or know about it. Anyways, I had a quick question, I guess, about the zoning. The main issue for me is the zoning. If townhomes can be developed in R1 zoning, R2 zoning, R3 zoning, R4 zoning, as the 4 examples that were mentioned with lower density, why do we have to do an R4 zoning change, and you guys have to approve that? Why do we have to do that, even with some sort of a restriction on the deed of what the uses could be later on? If it could be done in R1, why don't we do it that way? I think the council mentioned that it was a suggestion by the city or village to convert it to R4, but that was, from my understanding, that was only because they wanted to have one zoning all the way through. Just as well, they could do an R2 zoning for the whole thing, or R1 zoning, or an R3 zoning. So,
Well, that's because each zoning has the restrictions. And we felt that for this project, the R4 was appropriate.
but R3 would also satisfy the conditions. would
I
not.
understand that, but we felt that R4 was appropriate.
So to me, I appreciate your answer, but to me, it feels like you're guiding the developer into this is what we want to do.
Well, it's kind of a double-edged sword because we can control what goes in that R4.
Correct. But townhomes like this could also be developed in R3.
Yes. Paul?
Yeah, just so quickly on that, yeah, we determined that R4 was the best. In this case, mostly because the adjacent properties that abut it to the south are R4. So R3, there's nothing around this area that's R3 zoning, so we don't like to kind of plop spots, you know, different zones like that. And so we felt like it fit the character was what was already there, and so that's what.
So they just made it all R4.
Yeah, but it's a point. We have R1s adjacent to it as well, and that's where this fight's coming in. You know, you're looking at R4, you're looking at R3, and some people think, you know, this fits it because you just want to expand the R4 portion of it, but other people may feel like R1 does it. But we have examples of the 4 home unit developments with lower density, with, you know, even R1, R2, R3 zoning. So R1 is adjacent to it too, so could it not be an R1 zone? I mean, if the developer's not even using the utility that comes from R4 zoning, so what is the purpose? Like, that's where I'm failing to understand that. So I'm not sure if they shared that with, you know, the staff or the commission, or if someone can kind of.
Well, he just mentioned that they wanted to be, you know, consistent with the surrounding zoning, which is R4.
And R1.
Yeah, but more so R4.
No more boundaries, like Ken mentioned, that the property outlines, or when it borders it, there's more R1.
Well, it's, I see your argument. Thank you.
So that was one part. There's two more thing I want to mention.
I mean, part of the why is also that the comprehensive plan lays this out as other residential, so not single family. So that's also the determining factor of why we went with R4.
I'm not familiar with that, so I can't comment, but all I know is that there's developments that are townhomes, not single families, in a R1 zone that have been developed and approved by the village.
Well, the village has a comprehensive zone. A covenant comprehensive zone is, plan, excuse me, is zoning. And so we're just following your guidelines in the comprehensive plan.
We're talking about the sectors. We're talking about the sectors, the different sectors. Okay. So with the different sectors, when that was, I guess, labeled, from my understanding, that was labeled based on the school zone, or not the school zoning, but based on the school at the time. So school at the time can't be labeled as, you know, single family. It would be other, because that's the definition that it comes under.
Schools are allowed in all residential zones.
No, correct, but in the sector plan that I looked at, I think it's sector D, it basically talks about, there's like it's color coded brown, and it's other, and I was wondering why, you know, schools label as this, whereas in other schools are not labeled the same way. Other schools are labeled differently. So, but anyways, I don't wanna get into it too much, but I guess from my perspective, if you're not using the R4 zoning for its full utility and seeking all these restrictions on the deed, there's no point in going for the R4 zoning. You can go for an R3 zoning, even though it's a little bit out of place. I get that, it's not adjacent to anything, but we do have a really big mix right adjacent to it. Right beside the gas station there's a commercial zoning where there's townhouses. So anyways, I'll stop talking about the zoning part, and just wanted you you guys to consider that before making a decision. The second part I want to talk about, which is new to me, was the permeable surface area they talked about. And then there's a big portion that's not permeable. How will they, I'm not really sure engineering-wise how that really functions. They talked about tanks and things. But how will they ensure that there's no runoff into the permeable area that's not being collected into the tanks that they will put in underneath those areas, which will, you know, possibly cause more groundwater runoff to the back side of the property, which is adjacent to single-family homes.
We inspect that during the construction period. We make sure that the runoff is consistent going into the tanks.
Correct. Who will maintain that?
See,
Like
every-
who-
Well, developer the owner of the property will maintain the tanks, but the village will inspect it
I agree.
before, during
See,
construction.
they will not get permit from MWRD until they meet the storm management water requirements.
Correct.
So they have to get the permit from the MWRD, which manage the storm management in this area, in the entire Cook County area.
I understand that. I guess my question was, 5 years down the road, who will maintain that the slopes are proper?
Well, we'll inspect the property and we can, you know, ask the landowner, the owner of the
Okay.
property to fix it.
All right, and then the last point that I wanted to make about privacy, even though there wasn't, after, I think, mid-August meeting that we had, there wasn't much change to, the privacy concerns and the density concern. One of the things I wanted to recommend, whether it's 16 townhomes facing the Elm Terrace backyards, or 8, if it's the 8, which is currently proposed, I'm not proposing anything new, just whatever the developer's proposing, could they build the end unit townhome similar to if it is, as if it was a mid-unit townhome, which does not have windows on the side that look into those backyards and has windows back and front. So,
That would be up to the developer.
yeah, and the questions to the developer, yeah. And then that's nothing to, you know, we don't have to approve that, but in terms of coming to an agreement with the developer, I think you can build exactly that stuff, but not have windows on one side, pretend like it's a mid-unit, and still have access from the front and back for light and all that kind of stuff, and do that, so, yeah, thank you.
Thank you. Okay, I think we have time for just a couple more comments. Who wants to come up?
Yeah, nobody on the list.
Anybody else?
Hi, my name is Brian Levinson. I have a very brief prepared statement. Before I do that, I'm a member of the executive board of Ari Crown Hebrew Day School, so I'm speaking on behalf of the school. I wanted to address again, before my prepared statement, something that has been brought up numerous times, this concept of the economics of the project and a term I'm not overly familiar with, but kismet, which I believe means magically this happens to work out at the maximum density that is being requested. What the opponents of this project are not privy to is that there has been an ongoing negotiation with the sales price of the property that has been significantly reduced over time in order that the developer can meet the economic demands of the viability of this project. So the units were not backed into an economic model that was frozen in time. The reduction in density from the 5-story buildings down to where it is today has directly impacted the sales price in order to keep the project viable, which has directly impacted Ari Crown Hebrews Day School ability to do what it needs to do. So I just wanted to clarify that it was not a magic formula out of nowhere. With that, I'm going to go into very, very brief prepared statements. So thank you to the commission members for your time in listening to the merits of this case. My name is Brian Levinson. I'm a member of the executive board of Ari Crown Hebrew Day School. I've appeared before this commission several times on behalf of various civic and educational-based projects that all have had a significant positive impact on the village. I'm a board member of a number of Skokie-based not-for-profit organizations, a member of the Skokie Economic Development Commission, and hold dearly the best interest of the village as a whole. I am joined tonight by many Ari Crown parents and supporters, Ari Crown has been a valued member of the Skokie community for decades. Our families and close to 800 students include Skokie residents, Skokie business owners, Skokie civic leaders, and Skokie taxpayers. Ari Crown has been located in Skokie for close to 50 years. As this board is aware, Ari Crown has embarked on the redevelopment of a new school campus so we can be part of Skokie fabric for the next 50 years. In the search for that campus, it was our primary goal to keep the school in Skokie as a valued community asset. That process included working with village staff as well as this commission to ensure that the existing campus on Main Street be redeveloped for use that places the property on the tax rolls. We have worked with the developer to do just that. If the board votes against approval of this redevelopment plan, the property will be tainted for development, and finding a developer willing to purchase the property will be very difficult. Ari Crown, as a property owner in the community, should be afforded all the rights that are available to them to realize the best and highest use of their property. The developer has worked diligently with both the village staff and neighbors to adapt a proposed plan to accommodate many of the requests presented by the opposition. Due to those accommodations, Ari Crown has had to reduce the sales price of the property considerably to allow the economics of the development to work. We, the families and supporters of Ari Crown, implore the members of this commission to vote in support of the project consistent with the village staff recommendation. This support will strengthen Skokie through increased housing stock, positive economic impact, as well as supporting the educational needs of our children. Thank you.
Okay. All right, I think I just have time for a couple more comments.
I'm really sorry, I just found this sign-up board.
It's all right, just come up.
Hi, my name is Emmy Yamauchi. I'm a resident of Skokie, not the Main Street area, but rather on Oakton. I did want to say thank you very much, though, to those neighbors on Main Street. One, for including in their alternative proposal on-site affordable housing, which I strongly believe should be included in this development, rather than allowing the developer to pay $150,000 per unit fee in lieu, that at this point will really go nowhere, because there is no community land trust to put the money into for additional affordable housing. So I really would encourage that consideration be given to on-site affordable housing there. And I thank the Main Street neighbors for putting that into their proposal. It shows that they are interested in an integrated community where people of across the income spectrum can live together in the same community and not be segregated out. I also had noticed in this last invitation, because you mentioned the recent public meeting that was attended by 6 people, that invitation included an LLC named Green Space Development Ventures, and I wasn't sure who, they're kind of new to me at least in this development, because all of the previous communication has come from Luce and Associates. As far as financial viability goes, and the impassioned statement from the Ari Crown representative, I think what you've heard from everybody here is nobody is opposed to development, nobody is opposed to the sale, but they're asking that the community's interests also be taken into account. I'm sorry if the purchase price or the sales price of the land is going down, but that indicates to me that if the developer does not have the funding or the financing right now to move forward, where I'm living, I'm looking at the skeleton of Homewood Suites, which ran out of money, has not been worked on since March of this year. So I just hope that the finances are all in order for this, because originally this development was gonna be 120 units. Now it's down to 68, which the developer claims is the minimum number for financial viability, which also makes me wonder how much did they intend to make with 120 units? But it also makes me wonder if 68 really is the minimum financial viability. So those are my questions, but my big thank you is to the neighbors on Main Street for affordable housing. Thank you.
Okay. Lauren, can you make a brief?
Yeah, like 3 sentences. The village board approves whatever you send them. So don't say that this is not the final decision. If you say yes, they say yes. And they've explicitly said, oh, the staff said yes and the planning commission said yes, so we have to say yes, because otherwise it shows that we don't have any faith in them. This was a comment made by a trustee to the public, in regards to Carvana. So please keep in mind that whatever you give them, they will say yes to.
Thank you.
Hey there, just one brief comment. We've heard from several people here. We also heard from Mr. Levinson.
Can we have your name, please?
Oh, yeah, hey, my name's Josh Gordon, yeah. Hey, so just wanted to tell you, so we heard about the financial liability or the viability of the project. I just want to say there's one elephant in the room, that these same individuals also did have the other property they have on Conrad. That's 192 units that went straight through, no problem, and is also up, I think, going for the board. So I kind of question hearing that the 68 and the lowering of the price, but also at the same time, the other project has gone straight through, which has had the same ownership. So just want to point that out.
I don't think that has any bearing on this.
I think it does. It's the
I
same
do not-
group.
I don't think so.
Oh, okay.
Yes.
How does it not?
Doesn't.
Because back to what we've said a few times tonight, we're supposed to take, I think, our directive is to take each case as it comes before us, not who Mr. Crown was, Lester Crown, or who built a project somewhere else. Interesting, but not relevant to our discussion or to our vote. Oh, I don't think we shouldn't, but also I don't think we can consider it. So Conrad is one thing, I don't know much about it, but that's different. That's like telling
It's
me
the
about
same
Lester Crown.
ownership,
It
though.
doesn't matter. It doesn't matter to this decision.
All right. Did you want to have this final word?
Very briefly,
Okay.
very briefly. Speaking to Commissioner Berman's comments regarding what is and is not permissible for consideration, I would like to again just highlight a couple of the issues for your consideration. The definition of a building height, as written in section 118.32, does not allow for the exclusion of the parapet. I would welcome any discussion today that people would like to have about that. I have it printed out. Also about building height, other sections of the code give clear indications of whether it is an inclusive or exclusive or statement. And I would like to request of Village any documentation, any staff memorandums, any code memoranda that may exist that establish that inclusivity or exclusivity for this specific code requirement. There was also the comment about, well, why is this even before you guys to weigh in with any opinion if they do meet every requirement? Well, I believe it's with 1 acre and larger, it comes before Plan Commission, and that's because quirky things will come up with really large properties. Quirky thing with this property, it meets the strict definition of a corner lot. It meets the definition of a corner lot 2 times over. This has implications on what the front is, what the side is, what the rear is. Because it's such a large development, and because it's so quirky, the Plan Commission needs to exhibit some degree of common sense interpretation of what things mean. And to me, that means that you got 6 buildings on a street, that's their front door, that's a front yard. You got 24 buildings on another street, those are also front yards. Because again, if you cannot make a consideration like that, then I'm going to have to ask you why this is not deemed a corner lot, and we're not continuing along with the definitions that flow from there. Additionally, as mentioned previously, the submitted plan still fails by the definition of building width along Main Street. By their drawings, they have a 589-foot property line, they have 24 units, and you do the math, and that is an average width of 24.54 feet, which is less than 25. Parking fails according to their snow removal plan. And finally, just one last appeal, and hundreds of people have said it here tonight. The proposal is out of character with the neighborhood and similar successful developments, and for that reason, it should be a no vote on the rezoning. Thank you very much.
Thank you. Okay. Okay. Mr. Gershon.
I will make this short, but I wanna make sure that we answer some of the issues here. First, your definition of building height specifically states excluding steeples, church belfries, spires, those are different things, and parapet poles. There, sorry.
Yeah.
Thank you. A lot of comments about why we talk to staff, why we have to figure out how we make the project economical, why it took 3 months to take that much value out of this project and still make it work. We know you understand why those things happen, but we do have to live with your codes. And what your code does is it says when there are questions about zoning and interpretation, we have to go to your zoning administrator to interpret that. We've done that for 1.5 years. Whenever something comes up, we do it. We did that this week when there once again was a question on every single item that's been submitted here of whether or not we meet the definitions. And I would ask Paul to confirm, has the zoning administrator agreed that on every one of those items we are in compliance with the zoning code?
Yes, except for the impermeability, which is 67%, which the max is 65, and so after reviewing and with your agreement, you're asking for relief for those 2%.
I apologize, Paul's completely right, and we did ask for that. So, this isn't something where there's a question. You have a code, you've empowered someone in your staff who knows that code better than anybody to meet it, and the reason we call him, and by the way, I also know Ken reached out to the village staff as well for his questions, which I appreciate, it's what, they work for all of us, for the property owners, for the residents, et cetera. Paul reached out to Ken reached out to them as we did, and that's why we reached out for that. I was running through just a couple of quick things. One, it keeps being said, I wanna say, cause Paul clarified it, this is one development, therefore your code determines where our front and side yards are, and the reason why it was confirmed that we're in compliance is because we meet both those yards. The one place you'll notice an awful lot of people, Ken and others who are here, were from those homes on Elm Street that face us. Our original plan was 30 feet. Somehow we got no credit again for the fact that we increased that setback to 40 feet. And did that because of the concerns that people were there. The comment was made that we cherry-picked the properties that we did. I truly take some umbrage with that because we actually chose the properties that were near us. And the opposition did what we obviously could do. There are developments of townhomes and multifamily homes that are much more dense than ours, surrounding in Skokie as well. We didn't go out and cherry pick those. And what they do is to come in and say, well, yeah, it's done somewhere else less dense. That's not the issue. The issue is how we're in the area. And I appreciate that even with the numbers they gave, they identified 30 units per acre on the properties across the street from us on Main Street. Approximately half of what we are, a little less than half. Sorry, we are approximately half of what that is. The comment that we have summarily refused to consider other comments here, I don't know how to even respond to that, given where we were, by the way, on a project that met your codes for a planned development. We didn't come out here saying we want to build more than you allow in planned development. Met your codes of the planned development at 158 units, and we've dropped it all the way down to 57%. So, I want to be clear on that. There's a lot of discussions about taxes tonight. I say it again. If we're off and we actually think we're low, they think we're high, they think someone else can raise taxes here, that's not the question. This is not a special use. Economic impact is not part of the review of this project. Taxes aren't either. We simply identified, because the village made that clear to the seller and to us, that we needed to. I'm trying to do this as fast as I can, I promise.
Do it at all. The concept that we do not have not had active engagement with the community, we sent out the notices for each meeting approximately 7 to 10 days before the meeting occurred. And, Mr. Rosalie asked how notices went out. We first mailed notices to everyone on the legal notice list, that's the 250-foot notice list. We also had a list of approximately 15 people who asked us from the community to be included. If they weren't on that list, we added them, including something I've never done before, because many of them only gave us emails or phone numbers. We texted people and we emailed people if they weren't on the notice mailing list. And then to give Ken credit, Ken also, as I understand it, I know he did it the last time, so I checked with him, but I believe Ken passed out our notice by email to his entire mailing list. That's how people knew it was there. Some confusion about why we've got another plan, a different facade of the building that we're looking at. At the meeting on, I believe, the August 15th meeting, we said in addition to the plan commission, we're also coming back to appearance commission. And we want to hear from you what you'd like to see. What things can we change about the appearance of these buildings? We took all those ideas, we put them together, and on Tuesday presented them. And I think at least one person may not have commented, but of the people who were there, you got a good sense of the one woman who's here. I apologize, don't know her name, but who was up here before. There was a strong preference for what we were doing. And by the way, one of the changes on it was that those buildings that end towards the 8 buildings that end towards the 10 homes, we dramatically reduced the windows on those buildings because they wanted us to reduce the view out from there and made those more like the interior area with much smaller windows. The answer is we will submit that to Appearance Commission when we go there. We will tell them we're happy to build either one, but if those 6 people are any sense of it, the community seems to like that much more. That is absolutely what we think all of the community engagement we've had helps to lead to. Some question on use, I will tell you, we have looked at it. There is nothing that restricts use of this, sale of this property or use of this property for a non-educational use. Obviously a lot of comments here. I think that's the priority. I should also say that there are the 10 units that are north of us. None of those units face this property. We're in their rear yards, and you saw the landscape. There is one house on the northwest corner of us that actually faces the only single-family home that faces our property. There's another house to the east of us that is there. It's the multifamily homes on Main Street and the townhomes that actually face this project when they're front doors. We're happy to respond to anything else here with great respect. I've never been in a project that's had this much involvement with the community, and we think there's been a lot of change there. As I said from the very beginning, I'm never going to pretend we're going to make everyone happy. It's up to this commission to decide whether or not 57% reduction over what we're allowed to do as a planned development of this property is or is not meeting those needs, along with reducing the height from what's allowed to be height here for planned development, and getting rid of all the multifamily housing on this project. We truly appreciate it. We know it's been a long, hard process. Again, we're available if you have any questions. Thank you.
Okay. Gentlemen, I'm gonna ask you to be very, very brief.
Very brief. Just a point of clarification on the timeline. When we met before the Plan Commission last time, it was a 68 unit development. You asked us to work with the developers, asked the developers to work with the community on improving that plan. We had a meeting that was well attended, where it was very forcefully stated that, well, first they wanted to ask what our biggest concerns were. They were presented in their presentation: density, height, parking. We were very forcibly told that the density will not change, and if the density does not change, you cannot impact the height, you cannot impact the housing. Any meeting after that was all on appearance and pavers. It was 2 days after, it was a day after Labor Day. It was not well attended. There was not a lot of expectation from any changes coming from the developers to warrant that meeting. And that's the plan you saw here. It was very little change since you asked them to work with us. Thank you.
And finally,
Yep, two final points. Parapet walls and building equipment penthouses are causally linked in the definition for building height. Parapet walls and building equipment penthouses cannot be excluded when when such structures have a floor area less than 1/3 of the floor area of a typical floor. So that's again coming from Village Code, establishment of why, my plain text reading of the language states that the parapet walls can count against building height because they are not allowed to be excluded by this linked statement. Other thing I'd like to note, Mr. Gershon referenced their magnanimity, that fancy word, about not going the route of doing a denser plan development. I would like to point out that under a plan development, they would not be able to build on an R1 zone to the density that they have proposed here tonight. They would be limited to, I don't have it in front of me, but I believe it is 9.6 units per acre, up from 5 point something. Thank you very much.
thank you. Okay. Commission members, ready for proposal on case 2023-15P. That is a zoning map amendment at 4600 Main Street.
What's it? Before I move in, I will. A brief statement. It seems to me that most of the opposition tonight is not to this development, although it resolves in this development. It is a bunch of other questions that go to our codes, both our comprehensive plan and our zoning code. I took some notes, who the properties are marketed to, privacy, character of the neighborhood, ownership of the property, prior ownership of the property, fee in lieu instead of on-site affordable housing, value of property. All of those things are interesting, and as a community person, I would be interested in them, but they are not relevant to our discussion and our decision. I think our decision, as I thought earlier in the evening, is controlled by the law, by how this development is presented to us. If it is presented according to code, by the interpretation of our zoning administrator, our legal counsel, our planning director, including the parapet, the width of the units, if all of those things meet the definition of the code, the other issues, all of which are interesting, are not relevant to our decision. So therefore, I move acceptance of this project as presented, but for, I guess, the minor modification of the permeable surface. That's my motion.
What about for 15P?
This is for the zoning map.
Yeah, I was doing all three of them as
No,
we
no, no,
discussed them
we have to
tonight,
take them one
but
at a
I'll
time.
go with 15P then, as presented.
Second.
Who seconds?
Right here.
Motion by Scott Berman, seconded by Commissioner Franklin. Call for the vote. Commissioner Osley?
Aye.
Commissioner Manchella?
Aye.
Commissioner Scott Berman?
Aye.
Commissioner Franklin?
Aye.
Commissioner Gruppa?
Aye.
Commissioner Giovannaho?
Aye.
Commissioner Jeff Berman? Commissioner Matei?
Aye.
And I'll vote aye. In the subdivision at 4600 Main Street, case, with dedication, case number 2023-16P.
I will move approval again.
Motion,
I'll second.
second, Commissioner Giovannaho, thank you. Okay. Commissioner Osley,
Aye.
Commissioner Manchella,
Aye.
Commissioner Scott Berman,
Aye.
Commissioner Franklin,
Aye.
Commissioner Gupta,
Aye.
Commissioner Giovannaho,
Aye.
Commissioner Jeff Berman,
Aye.
Commissioner Matei,
Aye.
and I'll vote aye.
One more brief note before I move the acceptance of the third item. And that is, many times tonight, the community people said, and rightly so, we should think in terms of common sense. Well, that implies that we have discretion. I don't think we have discretion. I don't think we have discretion in many things, and this especially when the development is in front of us. We can think about the other hypothetical development that might have been possible, but that's not before us. So we don't have the discretion to dream of that, common sense or not. All we have to do is look at this. And therefore, I move acceptance of 17P as presented.
With revisions with new revisions by the developer. Is that
Oh, I'm sorry, and this is the one that we have to, I'm sorry, move as presented by the developer, but as Cindy reminds me, agreeing to the restriction to prohibit the north portion of the property to future use as, not as R4, but as R1.
And also.
It's a deed restriction
Right.
for R1.
And they're asking for a 2% relief over the maximum of 65%.
That's what, yeah, that's what I had included in my zoning
Yeah.
motion, but I
So
will
do you wanna
now,
repeat that again?
I will repeat that we are giving the exception to the developer to only create permeable surface at 65% instead of 67%.
No, it's 2% over 65,
67 instead of 65.
67%.
2%.
They are creating 2% less
Correct.
permeable surface than we would otherwise require.
Is that correct? Paul? Yes.
Sorry,
Okay.
but I have.
May I ask a question before we vote on it?
Yes, Commissioner.
So, the appearance commission is going to see both
They're gonna review the case.
rendering that we saw on today and in past meetings, as well as the one that's been redeveloped since Tuesday. Is that correct, or was presented at the Tuesday meeting?
They'll take, the appearance commission package will include what we want the appearance commission to look at, which will be, I would suspect the applicant will take the feedback that they've heard tonight and improve what has already been in the works and make sure the landscaping reflects all those things, and anything that has to do with that will be in the presentation. And maybe during when they present, they may show the evolution of their drawings, because that's always helpful when people are looking at the appearance to understand how they arrived at that point. So I would anticipate that as well.
So ultimately, though, that evolution would end presumably with what now is being said, but more the community's desire.
Correct. I would hope that they would include that, particularly because this particular project was once before the appearance commission in a different format with the larger units.
And they were advised to make changes. So one would assume they're going to reappear with changes.
Mr. Chairman, then I'll second Commissioner Berman's
Okay.
motion.
Just for clarification, this is for relief for 2% over the maximum of 65% permeability. Okay?
So it means that they are going to have more permeability than is required.
Less.
That's what I thought, when you said over, right, it's a double negative, that's correct.
Okay.
They are gonna
Just
have
want-
less
just-
permeability.
Just
than-
wanted to clear that up.
That's right.
Thank you. Call for the vote. Commissioner Osley?
Aye.
Commissioner Manchella?
Aye.
Commissioner Scott Berman?
Aye.
Commissioner Franklin?
Aye.
Commissioner Gupta?
Aye.
Commissioner Giovannahu?
Aye.
Commissioner Jeff Berman?
Aye.
Commissioner Matei?
Aye.
Now vote aye. Again, this case still has to go before the Board of Trustees at a time which will be set, I don't know, shortly. And if you're on our list, mailing list, you'll be notified when that case goes before the Board of Trustees. Thank you for attending tonight's Planning Commission meeting.